Chapter 601. What he was going to do was not a little trick. He was going to give her a taste of her own medicine. Su Peijian dared to plot against Su Qingsang, so she had to pay the price. And after that he would let her taste even more pain. No. Li Qianxue said first, if she dared to do this to Qingsang today, then she is no longer my daughter. I have nothing to do with her anymore. That's right. Old Master Li also said, Peijian has done this, and the Li family will have nothing to do with her in the future. He used to love Su Peijian, and he used to treat her as his own granddaughter. Okay. That was what Hu Jinyao wanted. He knew that Li Qianxue and Old Master Li might not be on Su Peijian's side. But after all, they had raised her for more than 20 years, and they had feelings for each other. Hu Jinyao was not worried that they would not cooperate. If they were not willing to cooperate, he would naturally think of other ways. But today he had to teach Su Peijian a lesson. Su Yusen did not speak. He sat there, his emotions hard to tell. How did Su Peijian become like this? That was his sister. How did his sister become like this? Also, I have a favor to ask of you, Grandpa and Mom. What do you mean by favor? Just say it. Li Qianxue had roughly guessed what Hu Jinyao wanted to do, but she waited for him to say it himself. Hu Jinyao's eyes swept across the three people in front of him, and finally, with a cold expression, he stated his request. Tomorrow morning, I hope, Mom, that you can publish in the newspaper or make a statement to break off your relationship with Su Peijian. The living room suddenly became silent, and Old Master Li and Li Qianxue both looked at Hu Jinyao. For Su Peijian, this move was really more painful than killing her. I can send her to prison, but I don't want to. That would be too easy for Su Peijian. I want to see her lose all her hope bit by bit. Li Qianxue lowered her head, not because she was soft-hearted, but because she felt a little suffocated. Speaking of which, all these things were caused by Su Qinghui. Li Qianxue closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, her eyes were firm. Okay. In that case, I have nothing else to do. Hu Jinyao stood up and said, I'll go upstairs to see Qingsang. Mom, Grandpa, you guys should rest early. He left, but no one else in the living room felt sleepy. Under such circumstances, who could really fall asleep? Su Yusen looked at Li Qianxue with a conflicted expression. Mom, are you really going to break up with Su Peijian? He didn't manage to call out the word sister, but he felt a little awkward when he called out her full name. That was his sister who had grown up with him. What else? Li Qianxue had been willing to give Su Peijian some face, but now she had cut off the last bit of it. You heard what your brother-in-law said. Even if I don't make a statement, will he let your sister suffer? Not to mention Hu Jinyao, even she wouldn't let Su Qingsang suffer again. Old Master Li didn't say a word. He didn't look too good. Although Su Peijian was no longer his granddaughter, they had been friends for so many years. However, none of them expected Su Peijian to do such a thing. The atmosphere in the living room was quite bad and heavy. Hu Jinyao's hostility faded a lot when he went upstairs and saw Su Qingsang's calm sleeping face. He sat down by the bed and gently stroked Su Qingsang's cheek. In such a short time he almost experienced the pain of losing her again. Hu Jinyao leaned over and kissed Su Qingsang on the cheek. She didn't wake up. Instead, the corners of her lips curled up slightly because of his kiss. She didn't know what he was dreaming about, but Hu Jinyao's expression softened almost instantly. She didn't know what he was thinking about. Then it became sharp again. Su Peijian. This time he was going to ruin her reputation. When Su Peijian opened her eyes, she felt a sharp pain in the back of her neck. She also had a strange feeling. She seemed to feel a little hot. She stretched and felt as if someone's skin was pressed against hers. Her sixth sense made her quickly open her eyes. The scene in front of her made her whole body freeze. What was going on? Beside her, two men lay on her left and right. Neither of the two men had any clothes on. Not only them, but she was also naked. Su Peijian's eyes widened. The last memory in her mind was that she was knocked unconscious by Qiu Yanba yesterday. Damn Qiu Yanba, how dare he knock her out? Su Peijian was furious. She raised her foot and was about to kick the man beside her off the bed. However, the man woke up at this moment. Miss Su, you're awake? The man was good-looking, but he looked a little effeminate. Su Peijian hated men like this the most. Get out of here. Su Peijian kicked the man's body. The man leaned to the side and quickly got up again. He approached Su Peijian. Miss Su, are you complaining that I didn't satisfy you yesterday? But I helped you call Hero over. He should have satisfied you, right? As he spoke, Hero also woke up. When he saw the scene in front of him, he immediately hugged Su Peijian. Miss Su, you're awake? Were you satisfied with my service yesterday? Get lost. Su Peijian raised her hand and was about to push the man away. Hiro hugged her tightly. Miss Su, if you're not satisfied, we can do it again today. With that, he hugged Su Peijian and was about to kiss her. How could Su Peijian let him have his way? She tilted her head, intending to slap the man. However, the man in front of her followed and held her hand. All right, Miss Su, don't be angry. We'll satisfy you now. Do you know who I am? Get out of here. Su Peijian was furious. She struggled to get up, but the two men just had their hands on her. Before she could break free, the door of the hotel room was suddenly opened. A large group of reporters rushed in. Su Peijian was instantly flustered. She quickly pulled up the blanket to cover her body. However, it was already a step too late. Those people had taken a lot of photos. You bunch of bastards, get out of here. Miss Su, may I ask how long you've been like this? Miss Su, did you call 2 gigolos at once because one couldn't satisfy you? Miss Su, did you become like this because you broke off your engagement with Mr. Chiu? Miss Su, what caused you to become like this? Miss Su, did these 2 gigolos have a long-term relationship with you? Miss Su, may I ask? Get out. All of you get out. If Su Peijian still didn't know that she had been set up by someone at this time, then she would have lived for more than 20 years in vain. She grabbed the pillow on the bed and threw it at the reporters. This action almost caused her to expose herself again. She had no choice but to cover her body with the blanket. If you don't get out now, wait for the lawyer's letter. Su Peijian said coldly, but the group of reporters ignored her and continued to take photos. If you continue to take photos, I will definitely make you suffer. Do you want me to remind you who I am? Su Peijian's voice couldn't make the reporters afraid at all. One of the reporters looked at Su Peijian. His voice sounded as if he was sympathetic. Miss Su, it seems that you really don't know. Your mother, who is the current CEO of the Li Corporation, just this morning. She has already announced that she has severed her relationship with you. What did you say? Su Peijian's eyes widened and she looked at the reporter in disbelief. Say it again. I said, your mother has already announced that she has severed her relationship with you. If you don't believe me, you can watch the news yourself. Su Peijian turned around and was about to look for her phone, but the reporters refused to leave. Instead, they interviewed the 2 gigolos. The one called Quan seemed a little embarrassed. We were called over by Miss Su yesterday. In the past she only called one, but now she feels that one is not enough to satisfy her, so she called me here too. By the way, when you want to publish, remember to censor it. Otherwise, I can also sue you for infringement. Su Peijian didn't have the mood to care about the nonsense of the 2 gigolos. She was almost naked, but she didn't have the mood to care. She found her phone on the bedside table and flipped through the news. Soon she saw Li Qinshua's statement. In that statement, Li Qinshu said that her behavior was wrong and that what she had done had brought shame to the family. Now she especially severed her relationship with Su Peijian. From today onwards, Su Peijian was no longer the daughter of the Su family, nor was she the daughter of the Li family. And everything about the Li Corporation, the Su family, and the Li family had nothing to do with Su Peijian. There were 2 statements. One was a paper statement. It included the notarial certificate that Li Qinshu had handed over to the lawyer to deal with to sever their relationship as mother and daughter. The other was a video interview. Li Qinshu sat in her own office in the Li Corporation and explained everything with a sorrowful and regretful attitude. Su Peijian sat there in a daze. She didn't even notice when the reporters finished their interviews and left. The room quieted down. The 2 gigolos had already put on their clothes and were about to leave. Stop. Su Peijian seemed to have only just reacted. She said coldly and glared at the 2 people in front of her. Ignoring the fact that she was still naked, she walked in front of the 2 people. Who asked you to come? Miss Su, wasn't it you who asked us to come? Hiro laughed and it was a frivolous laugh. Su Peijian nodded. She raised her hand and slapped them in the face, one on the left and one on the right. Really? Did I ask you to come? Quan was slapped. He tilted his head and wasn't angry. He looked at Su Peijian and chuckled. Are you angry? You were the one who asked us to come. Su Peijian gritted her teeth. What else did she not understand now? She had been put on a show. Needless to say, the person who had done this to her must be Hu Jinyao. Good, very good. Su Peijian gritted her teeth and suddenly pulled Quan over. She lifted her leg and kicked him in the crotch. Quan was in pain. Su Peijian glared at the man beside her with a cold gaze. Stop. The gigolo was shocked and quickly protected his important parts. Don't do anything rash. Otherwise, I'll call the police and sue you for intentional injury. Intentional injury? Su Peijian sneered. Before that, I'll sue you for rape. Su Peijian really couldn't take it lying down. She took out her phone as if she was going to call the police. However, the man laughed as if he was mocking Su Peijian. Miss Su, you were the one who asked us to come. We still have the call records from your phone. How are you going to sue us? That's right. Aquan also reacted. He straightened his body and walked in front of Su Peijian. Miss Su, you were the one who asked us to come and you were the one who asked us to serve you well. What? Are you not going to admit it now? Su Peijian was not angry. She raised her foot and kicked Aquan again. Aquan pulled another person up. She's crazy. Let's go quickly. Su Peijian's chest kept rising and falling. After everyone left, she screamed and was about to go crazy. Her reputation was now completely ruined. It was ruined by Hu Jinyao and Qiu Yanba. No, it was Hu Jinyao. If it wasn't for him. Qiu Yanba didn't have the guts. She gritted her teeth. Her breath was stuck there and she almost vomited blood. Hu Jinyao, Su Qingsang, you guys are so ruthless. Really too ruthless. And Li Qianxue. Su Qingsang slept a little late. She had drunk alcohol and was drugged. When she woke up, she felt a headache. She opened her eyes. Before she could get up, a pair of hands rubbed her forehead. The strength was neither light nor heavy. It gently rubbed her forehead, making her feel very comfortable. She couldn't help but open her eyes to look. When she met Hu Jinyao's face, she suddenly smiled. Does your head still hurt? There's some hangover soup. Mom asked someone to make it. Drink it first. Su Qingsang blinked and didn't get up. It's so comfortable. Rub it for me a little longer. This person was even ordering him around. Hu Jinyao wasn't annoyed, but his hands didn't stop moving. Su Qingsang yawned. What time is it? It's almost lunchtime. What time did you say it was? I slept for so long. Fortunately, they were in Lin City and didn't have to go to work. Su Qingsang suddenly sat up again. How did I come back yesterday? Why can't I remember? Hu Jinyao looked at her. Sometimes he really felt that Su Qingsang's vigilance was too weak. But who would have thought that Su Peijian would be so bold as to dare to hit him directly? Thinking of this, he felt that the punishment he gave her yesterday was too light. He had to make Su Peijian even more miserable, even more pathetic. However, Su Qingsang felt that something was wrong. I was knocked out yesterday, wasn't I? The only thing she could remember was that she had been knocked unconscious. Hu Jinyao looked at her, helped her up, and let her lean against him. After briefly explaining what Su Peijian had done, Su Qingsang's body froze and didn't move. Hu Jinyao looked at her without much worry in his eyes. What do you want to do? You can tell me. He only punished Su Peijian first and let Su Qingsang do the rest. Su Qingsang's head still hurt a little. She looked at the hangover tea on the side, picked it up and drank it. When she felt a little better, she looked at Hu Jinyao. Can you tell me first what you did? Don't worry about what I did. Think about what kind of price you want her to pay first. I'll help you vent your anger. Su Qingsang glanced at him and was about to say something. Xiaoyu had already come upstairs to ask them to go downstairs for dinner. Let's talk about this later. Su Qingsang didn't want to talk about Su Peijian for now. By the way, you didn't tell Mom, did you? Yes. Such a big thing of course had to be told. Su Qingsang was a little worried. My mom, what are you thinking? Do you think Mom will let Su Peijian go after doing such a thing? What did he mean? Su Qingsang quickly understood because after dinner she habitually swiped her phone. As a result, she saw the hottest news of the day. Su Peijian's news had now become the biggest news in Lin City. The former eldest daughter of the Su family has now been announced by her mother in the newspaper to dissolve their mother-daughter relationship. The eldest daughter of the Su family, Su Peijian, actually slept with 2 gigolos in one night. Her private life is a mess. The eldest daughter of the Su family is unrestrained, causing her mother to be dissatisfied. She dissolved their relationship. You don't know that the second-generation daughter of a wealthy family has a dissolute private life. She spent a night with 2 gigolos. The secrets of a wealthy family, the things that have to be said about the eldest daughter of the Su family. News like this filled Su Qingsang's screen after she got out of bed and got her phone. Su Qingsang was shocked by the news. She couldn't help but look at Hu Jinyao. Su Peijian had just dealt with her yesterday, and today she encountered such a thing. She would never believe that this had nothing to do with Hu Jinyao. You, don't look at these news, there's nothing to see. This is you? Su Qingsang looked around. Old Master Li and Li Qianxue had already gone to the living room outside after dinner. At this time, only she and Hu Jinyao were in the corridor. It's me. Hua Jinyao's face was calm. Su Qingsang bit her lip. She hadn't thought about how to fight back against Su Peijian, but Hua Jinyao had already made the first move. You already dealt with her and you still ask me what I plan to do? This doesn't count. This was not called dealing. Perhaps he should let Su Qingsang know what he would do if he really wanted to deal with someone. This is just a small punishment. If you still want to vent your anger, just tell me. Tell me what? She had nothing to say since he had already done what he had to do. Don't tell me that you sympathize with her. It's not sympathy. I don't have the energy to think about sympathizing with someone who wants to hurt me. I just feel a little emotional. If their identities hadn't been switched, if Su Peijian was still the eldest daughter of the Su family, then even if she and Su Peijian couldn't be close on the surface, at least they wouldn't be at each other's throats today. I won't allow you to use kindness and sympathy on such a person. Hua Jinyao wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her closer to him. Let me tell you, my punishment is already very light. I just gave her a taste of her own medicine. Chapter 602. The hooker incident this morning, coupled with Li Qianshua's statement, added together, had a huge impact. Even if Su Peijian was only an illegitimate daughter of the Su family, at least people didn't know about it publicly and would give her some face. The most direct effect now was to cut off Su Peijian's path of retreat. Because Su Peijian's face had been torn off, no one in the entire Lin City would give Su Peijian face in the future. In that case, even if she wanted to hurt Su Qingsang, she wouldn't have the ability to do so. Su Qingsang could think of these things and also understood what such a punishment meant to Su Peijian. She didn't speak, but her expression seemed to be a little conflicted. Don't tell me you're still sympathizing with that woman. A woman like Su Peijian didn't deserve sympathy at all. Not to mention this time, hadn't she made things difficult for Su Qingsang in Rong City again and again? If Su Qingsang softened her heart to her, Hua Jinyao was afraid that he would be ruthless again. I didn't. Su Qingsang wasn't that kind of saint. If she really let Su Peijian have her way, the one who would be ruined now would be her. Then you don't seem happy? Su Qingsang shook her head. She didn't pity Su Peijian. She just thought of Xiang Kaiping. If Xiang Kaiping knew that Su Peijian had fallen into such a situation, what would she do? Qingsang? I just feel sorry for Auntie. Su Qingsang and Xiang Kaiping had been together for a few months. No matter what, there was affection. She didn't believe that Hua Jinyao didn't have any sympathy for Xiang Kaiping. Hua Jinyao was silent. From the beginning to the end, no matter what happened all these years, Xiang Kaiping was innocent. Moreover, Xiang Kaiping was indeed a good person. She was good to him and Su Qingsang. At that time she also gave her heart and soul to them. Don't think about it. This isn't what you want. But I always feel that I've wronged her. Su Qingsang hugged Hua Jinyao's waist and whispered in a low voice, I always can't help but think that if I insisted on not saying it, if I pretended that nothing happened, if I continued to live with Auntie as my illegitimate daughter, would she have a much better life now? Don't think that. This is not your fault. Hua Jinyao wrapped his arms around her waist to give her strength and support. I know. Su Qingsang understood that none of this had anything to do with her, but she said, I can't control it. I can't help it. Before she left Rong City for Sea City, she went to see Xiang Kaiping. She didn't look well. What she was like when she was with us and what she is like now. You didn't see it. If you had seen it, you would have seen it. Su Qingsang knew that Xiang Caiping's loneliness had something to do with Su Peijian. With Su with Xiang. Whatever Su Peijian did was Su Peijian's business, but Xiang Kaiping was the one who had to bear the consequences. If Auntie finds out, she will break down. She had visited Xiang Kaiping a few times now. Even though Xiang Kaiping could not treat her as her daughter like she used to, her words and her entire demeanor showed that she was close to her. Su Qingsang Su Jinyao Hua. Su pressing she put her, with Su with she put it. I can't imagine what Auntie will do if she finds out. If you're worried about her, you can go back to Rong City to see her. I'm afraid my mom will be unhappy. She could tell that Li Qianxua didn't like her being too close to Xiang Kaiping. I don't think so. Just don't let Mom know. Su Qingsang nodded. She looked up at Hua Jinyao. Sometimes I feel like I can't handle anything well. I can't seem to do anything right. She should be close to Li Qianxua, but she always worried about Xiang Kaiping. She knew that it would make Li Qianxua unhappy, but she couldn't care less. You've done a good job. Hua Jinyao rubbed her hair and said softly, don't think too much. Su Qingsang glanced at Hua Jinyao. I don't want to. But I have to see Auntie when I go back. Su Peijian has no future in Lin City, so she can only go back to Rong City. When that time comes, you can tell Auntie what she did. I believe she will understand. Forget it. Let's not talk about it. Su Qingsang shook her head. She couldn't bear it. Although Auntie is not very old, her health is not very good. I won't let her worry if I can. Let's not talk about it. I said it's up to you. Hua Jinyao's words made Su Qingsang cast a sidelong glance at him. She seemed to be a little dissatisfied. You take after me all the time. Why don't I see you giving me an idea? Su Qingsang asked. Honey, you've really wronged me. Don't you know that I have no bottom line when it comes to you? Of course I will do whatever you say. Su Qingsang finally had a smile on her face. She punched Hua Jinyao's chest. Let's go. Grandpa and the others are still outside. Okay. Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang went out to the living room. They didn't notice that Li Qianxue was standing at the other end of the corridor. Her face was a little pale. Su Peijian was in her apartment. She looked at the TV screen in front of her. Her news was not only on the hot search list but also on TV. She really didn't know that she, Su Peijian, was so famous. There were many wine bottles on the coffee table in front of her, and a third of them were already empty. Su Peijian poured herself a glass of wine. Before she could drink it, the doorbell rang. Su Peijian didn't want to open the door, but the doorbell kept ringing. Su Peijian looked impatient, but she still stood up to open the door. Unexpectedly, the person outside the door was Su Qinghui. Seeing that it was Su Qinghui, Su Peijian smiled. What are you doing here? Are you here to laugh at me? Su Qinghui thought of today's news and couldn't believe that the woman on the news was his daughter. Peijian, aren't you in Rong City? Why are you back? And how did you become like this? Mr. Su. Su Peijian interrupted him. If I remember correctly, you broke off your father-daughter relationship with me a long time ago. So, in what capacity are you lecturing me now? When did I say that I broke off my relationship with you? Did I remember wrongly? Su Peijian sneered. Why do I remember that when I was in Rong City, you said that I had nothing to do with you? Su Peijian. He didn't say that. He said that Su Peijian had nothing to do with the Li family. All right. What do you want to teach me? Say it now. Su Peijian leaned against the door. She had no intention of letting Su Qinghui in. Su Qinghui looked at her face. Her indifferent attitude shocked him. How did you become like this? Not only her attitude but her face was also really ugly. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her face looked a little gray. He also smelled the alcohol on Su Peijian. What did I become? Su Qingsang sneered. What? Did you come here today to avenge your precious daughter? Then come on. I'm all ears. You can leave when you're done. Avenge who? Su Qinghui didn't understand. I'm talking about today's news. How could you be so depraved? Depraved? Su Peijian laughed. Her voice was very cold. Am I depraved? Why don't you ask your good son-in-law what he did? What do you mean? What do I mean? Su Peijian's lips were full of mockery. Do you think I'm that hungry and thirsty? So hungry and thirsty that I had to call a prostitute? Su Qinghui was silent. Of course, he didn't want to believe that the daughter he raised would do such a thing. Because of this, Su Qinghui came to her and wanted to ask for clarification. Yesterday, your good son-in-law called a prostitute for me. I was knocked out, and he hit me when I was down. Su Qinghui's eyes widened. He didn't believe Su Peijian's words. That's impossible. Fine, if you say it's impossible, then it's impossible. Please, I have nothing to say to you. Su Qinghui stood still. His face was full of pain as he looked at Su Peijian's current state. You Peijian. Tell me honestly, what did you do? If you didn't do anything, why would Hua Jinyao target you? Mr. Su, your question is so strange. What did I do? What can I do now? Don't forget that Su Qingsang is now the wife of the president of Tianyu Group. Hua Jinyao is the president of Tianyu Group. What can I do? You should ask Hua Jinyao what he did. He just dealt with Hua Yifan a few days ago and drove him out of the Hua family. Now it's my turn. Mr. Su, I also want to ask something. Is it that after I'm no longer the daughter of the Li family, I'm not even a human anymore? I don't even have the right to stand in the same city and breathe the same sky as them? Su Qinghui didn't understand. He could guess that things weren't that simple. All right. Anyway, I already know that whether it's you or Li Qianxue, you don't see me as your daughter anymore. In that case, you don't have to come here to express your fake concern. I don't need it. Peijian. Su Qinghui had a lot to say, but now he didn't know what to say. He looked a little conflicted. He was more heartbroken than helpless about Su Peijian becoming like this. Go abroad. Which country do you want to go to? I'll help you with the procedures. You can leave here and live abroad. You can, Mr. Su. You have nothing to do with me anymore. In that case, where I go and how I live has nothing to do with you. Now please, you're not welcome here. Patient? Su Qinghui really felt that it would be better for Su Qingsang to leave here and start over. Please? Unfortunately, Su Peijian didn't want to give him such a chance. She closed the door with a bang. Su Qinghui looked at the closed door for a long time. He raised his hand and put it down again. Finally, he left helplessly. Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao stayed in Lin City for another 2 days before returning to Rong City. Su Qingsang was fine. She participated in the rescue, so the hospital gave her a holiday. She would even be praised when she returned. However, Hua Jinyao had been out for so many days and his work had been delayed a lot. Although he had dealt with a lot of work through email and video conferences, there were still many things that needed to be solved when he returned. Especially when he heard yesterday that Hua Yifan had gone to look for Hua Mingguang. After coming out of Hua Mingguang's office, Hua Yifan actually returned to Tianyu Group. Although he was no longer the vice president, Hua Mingguang gave him a special team. It had only been 2 days and the situation had changed so much. Hua Jinyao really wanted to know what kind of plan Hua Yifan had come up with to make Hua Mingguang pay so much attention to it. After dinner, old Master Li called Hua Jinyao to the study to play chess. When Li Qianxue entered the door, she saw Su Qingsang packing her luggage. In fact, there weren't many things. Most of them were gifts that Li Qianxue and old Master Li had asked Su Qingsang to bring to old Master Hua. Mom? Seeing Li Qianxue enter the door, Su Qingsang put down the things in her hands. Why aren't you sleeping yet? I came to see you. To talk to you. Li Qianxue looked at Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang had been resting well these past few days. Her complexion was much better than when she had just returned from the disaster area. You're leaving tomorrow. I really can't bear to part with you. I can't bear to part with you either. In the past few days, Li Qianxue had been treating her well in all kinds of ways. She had been very considerate in all aspects of clothing, food, housing, and transportation. She knew that Li Qianxue was good to her and was very grateful. Mom, don't worry. It's only 2 hours from Rong City to Lin City. I'll come back to see you often when I'm free. Besides, you can come and see me when you're not busy. 2 hours isn't a long time, but it's another city after all. I'm not by your side. I'm always afraid that you won't be able to take care of yourself. How can that be? I'm not a child. In my eyes, you're no different from a child. Li Qianxue also knew about what had happened this time. She was already very disappointed with Su Peijian. You ran into something like that when you went out for a meal. Qingsang, do you understand how I feel? I'm really worried about you. Mom? I'll be more careful next time. Su Qingsang also knew that she had been careless this time. But how did she know that Su Peijian would do such a thing? I promise there won't be a next time. Don't worry. Li Qianxue knew that she was simple-minded. When it came to scheming, she was afraid that she was no match for Su Peijian. Su Peijian had nothing now. She was afraid that she would hit the bottom, and when that time came she would go crazy. Why don't you go back to Rong City and ask Hua Jinyao to find 2 people to follow you and protect you? Mom? Su Qingsang touched her forehead. I'm a doctor. Do you think it's appropriate for me to have 2 bodyguards? How is it inappropriate? Your safety is always the first priority. Mom. Su Qingsang was extremely helpless. Don't worry, I really will protect myself. I'll be careful next time I go out. She would naturally be careful when she went out, but what if she sent herself to the door? She heard the conversation between Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao that day. She knew that Su Qingsang would have to visit Xiang Kaiping after returning to Rong City. No matter how angry Li Qianxue was about this, it was useless. Xiang Kaiping recognized Su Qingsang first. She and Su Qingsang had feelings for each other. But Xiang Kaiping was Su Peijian's biological mother. Now Su Peijian had become like this because of them. Su Qingsang had good intentions and sympathized with Xiang Kaiping. But what if Xiang Kaiping felt that she and Hua Jinyao had caused Su Peijian to become like this and wanted to take revenge? Li Qianxue didn't want to think too much of people, but as a parent she had to be more worried. Mom? Su Qingsang's voice brought Li Qianxue back to her senses. She looked at Su Qingsang and was about to tell her not to visit Xiang Kaiping when she returned to Rong City. It wasn't that she was stingy or jealous. That was part of the reason. But more than that, she was worried that Xiang Kaiping might hurt Su Qingsang because of Su Peijian. However, before she could say anything, Xiaoyu came upstairs and said that Su Qinghui was here. As soon as she heard that Su Qinghui was here, Li Qianshue's face suddenly darkened. What is he doing here? Kick him out. The Li family doesn't welcome him. Madam, sir said that he's here to see Miss Su. When Su Qingsang went downstairs, Su Qinghui was sitting on the sofa in the living room. There was a big box in front of him. It was obvious what was inside. That. Qingsang. Su Qingsang walked to Su Qinghui and sat down opposite him. How did you know I was here? I asked around and found out. Thinking of what happened to Su Peijian the day before yesterday, Su Qinghui couldn't help but look at Su Qingsang a few more times. His eyes were calm and his expression was peaceful. It didn't seem like anything had happened. Qingsang, have you seen Peijian recently? Peijian? No. She was just drugged by Su Peijian and wanted to destroy her innocence. The two of them really didn't touch each other. No. If she hadn't seen Su Peijian, didn't that mean that the two of them didn't have a conflict? Yes. Su Qingsang raised her eyebrows and was a little confused. Dad, why are you asking this? You should have heard about what happened to Peijian, right? I know a little. Knowing a little meant that she knew a lot? Su Qinghui looked at Su Qingsang as if he was trying to find out her real thoughts. Did Huo Jinyao do that? Yes. It was indeed Huo Jinyao's doing. Su Qingsang didn't want to deny it. Su Qinghui's face turned red for a moment. He sat there and almost fell into a gloomy atmosphere. You guys? He suddenly stood up and looked at Su Qingsang. Why? Why what? Su Qingsang didn't seem to understand. Why did you do this? Su Qinghui knew that he had made a big mistake, but at this moment he really felt that his heart was stuck. He couldn't let it go up or down. He walked back and forth 2 steps, then suddenly stopped and stared at Su Qingsang. You guys can't tolerate her so much? Just because she made things difficult for you at the Tianyu Group's banquet last time? Su Qingsang didn't answer Su Qinghui's words. She looked at Su Qinghui and sighed in her heart. No matter how speechless Su Qinghui was about Su Peijian's actions, in his heart he still thought about Su Peijian. He had pure father-daughter feelings for her. Qingsang, why didn't I know that you guys have become like this? They found Su Peijian a gigolo and ruined her reputation. They even made Li Qianxue issue a statement to sever their mother-daughter relationship. You guys are too ruthless. Su Qingsang didn't say anything. She had always known that in Su Qinghui's heart she couldn't compare to Su Peijian. Therefore she was too lazy to refute the accusations against him and the blame he had now. Su Qinghui knew that he owed Su Qingsang a lot. But this debt was caused by him, not by Su Peijian. Qingsang, no matter what, Peijian is your sister. She is innocent in this matter. How can you do this? What's wrong with Qingsang? Li Qianxue went downstairs and happened to hear the last few words. Her expression suddenly changed. Su Qinghui, tell me. How is Qingsang vicious? Su Qinghui looked at Li Qianxue. At this moment, her eyes were sharp and aggressive. For a moment, he almost thought that the two of them had returned to the scene of tit for tat. Qianxue, I know you hate me. I also know that I am the one who caused all the fault. But no matter what, Peijian was raised by you. Don't you think it's too ruthless to treat her like this? Su Qinghui. Li Qianxue had long given up on Su Qinghui and no longer loved this man. However, his accusations, especially his accusations against Su Qingsang, made Li Qianxue extremely angry. Su Qinghui, who are you calling ruthless? She took 2 steps forward. Her aggressive appearance made Su Qingsang a little worried. She stood up as if she wanted to stop Li Qianxue, but Li Qianxue waved her hand away. She stood in front of Su Qinghui. The expression on her face was disdain, disgust, and deep hatred. Su Qinghui, who can be more ruthless than you? Who can be more ruthless than you and your daughter? You say I'm ruthless and you say Qingsang is ruthless? Why don't you say how ruthless you were when you replaced my daughter? Su Qinghui's lips moved. He wanted to say that he already knew he was wrong and had been punished. However, Li Qianxue didn't give him a chance at all. Yes, now that you've come to my door and accused Qingsang, why don't you think about your good daughter, your precious daughter? What did she do? If I was really ruthless, I would have broken off all relations with Su Peijian long ago after I came back from Rong City. Why didn't I? I cared about the last bit of mother-daughter love, but what about Su Peijian? Do you want to hear what she did? Before you blame Qingsang, why don't you first ask what Su Peijian did to Qingsang? Every time she asked a question she took a step forward. Su Qinghui was repeatedly questioned by her. He had already retreated to the corner of the sofa. Qianxue, Su Qinghui thought of Su Peijian's grievances and how she had lost everything. Now even her reputation was ruined. For the past 2 days the trending searches on Weibo and the local news had been reporting on this matter. There was no sign of the popularity subsiding at all. Su Qinghui still felt sorry for Su Peijian when he thought of her hiding in the house and drinking alone. She was the child that he had raised, so he wanted to ask Su Qingsang about it. Of course, he also hoped that the relationship between the two sisters could be eased and not become like enemies. However, looking at Li Qianshua's attitude now, he suddenly felt a little uncertain and a little panicked. That panic made the way he looked at Li Qianshua changed. Chapter 603. Don't call me that. You calling my name makes me want to vomit. Li Qianshua's words were sharp and merciless. She looked at Su Qinghui and pointed at the door. Get out of here. Qianshua, do you have to do this? Can't we talk it out? Talk it out? Who wants to talk it out with you? Have you talked it out with Qingsang? Li Qianshua thought of all the good things Su Peijian had done and all the grievances Su Qingsang had suffered. Okay, if you want to talk it out, I'll talk it out with you. You should know what good things your precious daughter has done. With a cold face, she suppressed the anger in her heart and briefly told him what Su Peijian had done a few days ago. She was satisfied to see Su Qinghui's expression change. Qianshua, what did you say? Was this true? He couldn't help but look at Su Qingsang and found that her face was indifferent. Obviously, she was also dissatisfied with him now. Li Qianshua sneered. She was still partial to him. How could he come to her door and criticize her daughter like this? That was enough. What did I say? Do you think I would lie to you? Li Qianshua sneered. Let me tell you, I don't want to do such a thing. As she spoke, she turned to look at Su Qingsang. Her eyes were full of pity and guilt. If Qingsang hadn't been lucky enough to meet Qiu Yanba, if Su Peijian had just asked a man to hurt Qingsang, would Qingsang still be standing here today? Of course, this era was much more tolerant of women. But what was Su Qingsang's status now? She was the wife of the president of Tianyu Group, the eldest granddaughter-in-law of the Huo family. Wu Jinyao was just giving her a taste of her own medicine. You came here just like that and criticized your other daughter in order to help her vent her anger. Su Qinghui, you are such a good father to Qingsang. Su Qinghui's expression had changed a few times. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. He asked Su Qingsang just now, and she said that she had never seen Su Peijian. Su Qingsang stood to the side and didn't say anything. She was a little helpless. She looked at Su Qinghui without the intimacy at first. Su Qinghui felt uncomfortable under her gaze. Why didn't you say it just now? If she had said it, he wouldn't have misunderstood. You started blaming Qingsang as soon as you came in. What do you want her to say? Li Qianshua was so angry that she almost laughed. Su Qinghui, you're really biased. Su Peijian is your daughter, but Qingsang is not your daughter, is she? Su Qinghui was speechless. He looked at the anger on Li Qianshua's face and knew that he had messed up again. Qianshua, I seem to remember telling you that you owe Qingsang a lot. You owe her your whole life. Su Qinghui, do you know that the person you should compensate the most is Qingsang? But how did you do it? You allowed Su Peijian to hurt her. You allowed her to scheme against Qingsang. In your heart, you don't even see Qingsang as your daughter. Su Qinghui stood there awkwardly. Qianshua, I didn't? You didn't? Let's not talk about what Su Peijian did. Wu Jinyao only punished her a little. Even if I really wanted to deal with Su Peijian, so what? Li Qianshua was also angry. She said without thinking, she's been occupying Qingsang's place for so many years and wronged Qingsang for so many years. Even if I want to break off relations with her, so what? Her attitude was sharp and aggressive. With every word she said, the anger on her face grew. Su Qinghui kept retreating. He knew that he had made a mistake this time. Qingsang, I'm sorry. He turned to look at Li Qianshua, and the expression in his eyes became more and more obscure. Qianshua, I'm sorry. Sorry? I don't need it. Li Qianshua didn't accept it at all. Those 3 words were too cheap. You're always like this. After you hurt someone, you always say sorry so casually. How can there be such a good thing in this world? You want others to forgive you just because you say sorry? You want them to forget all the mistakes you've done? I didn't mean that. Su Qinghui was very regretful. He seemed to be wrong again. Time and time again. He had clearly decided that no matter what happened, he would stand by Li Qianshua's side, but now things had turned out like this. This was his fault. He wanted to apologize, but the word sorry really became too light. Qianshua, I promise I won't do this in the future. No need. Su Qinghui, we don't need your future. We can live a better life without you. Li Qianshua pointed at the door again as she spoke. Su Qinghui, get lost. You're not welcome here. Su Qinghui looked at Li Qianshua and his lips moved. He wanted to explain, but he didn't know how to explain. He originally wanted to repair his relationship with Li Qianxue, but recently, these things happened one after another. Not only did he fail to repair his relationship with Li Qianxue, but it also made the relationship between the two of them worse and worse. This was something Su Qinghui didn't expect and didn't want to see. Qianxue. Could she give him another chance? So that he could make up for his mistakes? He really knew that he was wrong. I said get lost. Li Qianxue was very angry. She was really tired of Su Qinghui. Su Qinghui, go feel sorry for your precious daughter. You don't treat Qing Sang as your daughter anyway. Also, we're divorced. Whether it's me or Qing Sang from now on, we have nothing to do with you. Please don't appear in front of us again. I'm not. Su Qinghui wanted to defend himself, but Li Qianxue didn't want to listen. She pushed Su Qinghui and asked someone to chase him out. The people who worked in the Li family all knew that Su Qinghui was the original master, but at this moment they also looked embarrassed. Su Qinghui looked at this situation and knew that it was useless for him to stay any longer. He could only plan for the future. He looked at Li Qianxue and wanted to say something, but he hesitated. So many words were stuck in his throat. In the end, he helplessly lowered his shoulders and left, looking dispirited. After he left, Li Qianxue walked to the sofa and sat down. Her condition wasn't much better than Su Qinghui's. She looked extremely tired. But soon she stood up again. Looking at Su Qing Sang standing beside her, she went forward and hugged her. She didn't say anything, but her expression was full of guilt. Mom, don't be angry. Compared with Li Qianxue's anger, Su Qing Sang's sadness and discomfort only lasted for a while. She had long been used to it. She was used to Su Qinghui not caring about her. He didn't care about her either. She didn't feel very sad. What made her uncomfortable was Li Qianxue's attitude. Imperceptibly, her relationship with Su Qinghui seemed to be getting worse and worse. Li Qianxue shook her head. She stepped back a little and patted Su Qing Sang's cheek. Okay, you continue to pack your things. I'll go with you. Mom? Don't worry, I'm fine. She had already gotten over the biggest blow. This situation couldn't hurt her anymore. She just felt wrong for Su Qing Sang. Qing Sang, I'm sorry. Su Qing Sang shook her head and took Li Qianxue's hand upstairs. Mom, let's go. Accompany me to pack my luggage. Didn't you have something to say to me just now? Li Qianxue thought of what she was about to say just now, and her lips moved. If you go back to Rong City, remember, yes? Remember to be on guard against Su Peixian. Not only her, but we have to stay away from people related to her. Li Qianxue still said it in the end. She believed that Su Qing Sang would understand. Okay. Su Qing Sang nodded and didn't object. Mom, don't worry. I won't let Su Peixian have a chance to bully me again. Besides, I don't think she can care about it now. After this incident, it was basically impossible for Su Peixian to marry into the Hua family. Her reputation in Lin City had already been ruined. She believed that she wouldn't be able to cause any waves. Mom, I'm not saying that you have to think so badly of her. It's just that she's no longer the Su Peixian from before. I'm always afraid that she'll hurt you again if there's a chance. Don't worry. Mom, I know. I know what I'm doing. That's good. Li Qianxue reminded her again and again, but no matter how worried she was, Su Qing Sang still had to go to Rong City with Hu Jinyao. Now she could only remind Hu Jinyao again and ask him to protect Su Qing Sang. It was already afternoon when Hu Jinyao and Su Qing Sang got off the plane. The two of them got into Yang Wenchang's car. Hu Jinyao asked Su Qing Sang to go home and rest, while he went to the company. Su Qing Sang knew that he must have a lot of work to deal with during this period, so she didn't argue with him. She just said that she could go to the old house. She brought a gift from home for old Master Hua, and since she was back she had to say hello to Lu Tongjia. Hu Jinyao didn't object. He asked Yang Wenchang to send him to the company first, and then to send Su Qing Sang to the Hua family. It was such a coincidence that he entered the Tianyu group. Hu Yifan happened to come downstairs. Several people followed behind him. Hu Jinyao glanced at them and saw a few familiar faces. He remembered that these people were from the research and development team, but now they were all following behind Hu Yifan. Hu Jinyao narrowed his eyes slightly, and Hu Yifan naturally saw him. He spoke to his secretary next to him, and the group of people stood there without moving. He walked straight to Hu Jinyao. Brother, you're back. Hu Jinyao looked relaxed and chuckled. Yes, I'm back. You're not the only one back. I'm back too. There was a double meaning in his words. Hu Jinyao nodded. Yes, I can see that. It was Uncle who asked me to come back. Hu Yifan added with a smile, Speaking of which, Uncle seems to be still in the company today. Do you want to go upstairs to look for him? There was an invisible intimacy in his voice, as if he was Hua Mingguang's son. Hua Jinyao wouldn't argue with Hua Yifan over such a boring matter. He took a step to the side. You seem to be going out. Please. Yes. The research and development team has been very helpful these days. Everyone has worked hard. I said I'd treat them to a meal and reward them. By the way, you probably don't know the case we're working on now, do you? It doesn't matter. Uncle has a copy of my plan. You can ask him to show it to you. I don't mind. After saying this, Hua Yifan went back to the group of people. Compared to the past, the pride on his face couldn't be concealed. Hua Jinyao narrowed his eyes and watched Hua Yifan leave with the group of people. Finally, he stepped forward and went to the president's exclusive elevator. Hua Mingguang was indeed in the company today. Hua Jinyao entered the door and looked him up and down. He found that Hua Jinyao was only slightly tanned, and he seemed to be in good spirits. You still know to come back? Putting the documents in his hand aside, Hua Mingguang's voice was indeed a little dissatisfied. Don't you think about who you are? You came so far away to do good deeds. What? Is there no good deeds in Rong City for you to do? Hua Jinyao didn't answer his question. He took a few steps forward and sat down opposite Hua Mingguang. When I came up just now, I ran into Hua Yifan. The accusation on Hua Mingguang's face suddenly disappeared. He looked at Hua Jinyao with an uncomfortable expression. Dad, I really want to know what method he used to persuade you to let him re-enter Chanyu. Jinyao. Hua Mingguang's voice was filled with helplessness. Yifan is your cousin. Yes. He's my cousin, a cousin who thinks of ways to pull me down from the position of president all day long. A cousin who wants to replace me all the time. Jinyao. Hua Mingguang's expression became serious. What nonsense are you talking about? What happened last time was a moment of confusion. All these years he can be considered to have done his best for the company. Why do you keep staring at his shortcomings? Hua Jinyao's lips were pursed into a straight line. He stared straight at Hua Mingguang, making Hua Mingguang feel a little uncomfortable. He finally spoke. Dad, Hua Yifan is your son, right? What are you saying? Hua Mingguang was angry. Do you think I'm deliberately favoring him? That's because he's really good at things. As he spoke, he took out a plan from the drawer. I knew you wouldn't be convinced, so I asked him to leave a copy of the plan for me. You can take a good look at it yourself. Hua Jinyao took the plan from his hand. He didn't believe that Hua Yifan could have any good ideas. What he should do during this period of time was to hide in a corner and keep a low profile. However, after flipping through a few pages of the plan, his expression immediately changed. He glanced at Hua Mingguang with obvious shock in his eyes. You mean this was done by Hua Yifan? What else? Hua Mingguang raised his eyebrows. He was quite dissatisfied with his son's doubts. I've said it before. Yifan has real talent. You look down on him like this and target him everywhere. He still wants to do his part for the company. Hua Jinyao slapped the plan in front of Hua Mingguang. Dad, I only found out today that it's not only my mother who doesn't treat me as a son. She wants me to die back then. Turns out that you're the same. Hua Mingguang's expression suddenly became very ugly. He glared at Hua Jinyao. What nonsense are you talking about? Is it nonsense? Hua Jinyao placed his hands on the edge of the desk and leaned forward a little. He glared at Hua Mingguang and said very softly, Dad, Hua Yifan is a traitor. He even tried his best to deal with me and embarrass me. In your eyes, it's me who looks down on him and targets him everywhere? Aren't you being so biased because you wish that I was the one who died back then? Hua Jinyao. Hua Mingguang was so angry that his face turned red. Shut up. I'll shut up after you finish speaking. Hua Jinyao stood up straight. It's been so many years. No matter how hard Mom has tried to make things difficult for me, you've never spoken up for me. I always thought that maybe you didn't want to be stuck between Mom and me. Or maybe you just wanted to take care of Mom's emotions. Only now do I know that you're the same as Mom. You blame me, hate me, and wish that I was the one who died. Hua Mingguang's expression was very ugly, but Hua Jinyao felt bored. He looked at the plan again, turned around, and left without saying a word. He returned to his office and dealt with some of the work that had piled up. Looking at the time, it was already late. Just as he was about to get off work, Yang Wenchang came back from sending Su Qingseng back to the old mansion. President Hua. Yang Wenchang had to stay in Rong City to deal with some matters, so when Hua Jinyao went to the disaster area, he returned after delivering 2 trips of supplies. Yang Wenchang saw that Hua Yifan had returned to the company in the past few days, and he was really angry. As soon as Hu Jinyao returned, he couldn't wait to report Hu Yifan's recent actions and movements to him. After saying that, Yang Wenchang added, "Manager Hua has been really arrogant recently. He acts as if he's still the vice president of the company." Hu Jinyao's hand unconsciously tapped the table. After Yang Wenchang finished speaking, he glanced at him. "Don't worry about his attitude for now. Go and investigate something." "What? Where did Hu Yifan's plan for AI come from?" Yang Wenchang was stunned for a moment. Hu Yifan had recently set up a department that specialized in research and development. He had never known what medicine he was selling. However, he didn't expect it to be related to AI. Such an extremely promising and cutting-edge plan is definitely not something Hu Yifan could produce. Go and find out who he has been in contact with recently. Okay. Also, have someone continue to keep an eye on Su Peijian. Although Su Peijian was still in Lin City, she would probably return to Rong City soon. After all, there was no place for her in Lin City. However, there was still Hu Yifan in Rong City. Yes. Yang Wenchang nodded. Hu Jinyao thought for a moment and stopped him. "By the way, find 2 bodyguards to protect Qingsang's safety." Yang Wenchang was stunned for a moment. "President Hua? Just protect her in the dark. There's no need to protect her in the open. Qingsang doesn't like people following her." "Yes." After giving out all the orders, Hu Jinyao leaned against the back of the chair. He knew how much information Hu Yifan had in his mind. He was indeed talented, but Hu Jinyao didn't believe that he could come up with such a plan. Chapter 604. It was already very late when Hu Jinyao got home. Su Qingsang was still awake. Seeing Hu Jinyao enter the room, she put down the book in her hand. "You're back? Have you eaten?" "I have." Hu Jinyao didn't say anything. He walked to the bed and hugged Su Qingsang, who was about to get up. Su Qingsang was stunned for a moment. Her lips moved, but she didn't ask anything. The room was very quiet. Neither of them spoke. A few minutes later, Su Qingsang patted Hu Jinyao's back. "Grandpa told me to tell you that it was his decision to let Hu Yifan return to the company." Hu Jinyao's body froze for a moment. He let go of Su Qingsang and looked at her face. "You know?" Su Qingsang nodded. They returned from Sea City, but Hu Jinyao didn't go back to the old mansion for dinner. Old Master Hu was a smart man. How could he not know that Hu Jinyao was angry? Grandpa said that nothing beats family harmony, so... She didn't finish her sentence, but Hu Jinyao understood what Old Master Hu meant. It was nothing more than asking him to bear with it for the sake of the bigger picture. Patience? The problem was he didn't want to endure it. He didn't want to put up with Hu Yifan or Su Peijian. He didn't want to see Hu Yifan strut around in front of him. Old Master Hua had thought that Hu Yifan would go home for dinner, so he wanted to tell Hu Jinyao himself. However, Hu Jinyao didn't want to go home. He had no choice but to call Su Qingsang to the study when she was about to go home and briefly explain the situation to her. "Grandpa said that he understands your feelings and knows that you have grievances in your heart. But no matter what, Hu Yifan is your younger brother. His proposal this time was also very good. So please understand." Su Qingsang's voice was very low, and she held Hu Jinyao's hand as she spoke. She could understand his feelings, but she didn't know how to help him. "Honey." Hu Jinyao suddenly held Su Qingsang's hand and looked at her attentively. "What? If I leave the Hua family one day, will you come with me?" Su Qingsang frowned slightly. "Are you serious?" "Yes, I'm serious." Hu Jinyao looked at her with a serious face. "I don't want to endure it anymore." "Then don't be patient. No matter what you want to do, I will support you." Hu Jinyao smiled. It was a rare smile on his face after returning to Rong City. He held Su Qingsang's hand and kissed it. When he looked up again, his eyes were very sharp. "However, I don't plan to leave the Hua family." Su Qingsang didn't understand. Hu Jinyao slightly raised the corners of his mouth with a hint of playfulness. "Why should I be the one to leave? The Hua family can only be mine." He wasn't greedy for his current position. If it hadn't been for that accident, the Hua family would have been Hu Jinkai's. He didn't care who the president of Tianyu Group was, and he didn't care about Hua Mingguang's attitude towards him. However, no one could replace Hu Jinkai in controlling the Hua family in Tianyu Group. "Jinyao, then you, don't worry, I'm fine." Since Hu Yifan was feeling smug now, he would just let him be for a few more days. It was just a plan. He would have a way to make it impossible for him to complete it. Su Qingsang didn't respond. She reached out and hugged him again. It didn't matter if he stayed in the Hua family or left the Hua family. No matter where he was, she would go. As for whether he was the president of Chanyu Group or not, when she was with him, didn't she think that he was just a small employee? So what did it matter whether he was or not? No matter what you plan to do, I'll support you. Huo Jinyao lowered his head. When he met her misty eyes, he leaned over and kissed her on the lips. He held her in his arms. In a place where Su Qingsang couldn't see, his deep eyes were filled with sharpness. When Huo Jinyao entered the cafe, he immediately saw Qi Shiwei, who was sitting by the window. Qi Shiwei sat there with her long hair draped behind her head. She seemed to have become a little more plump. She sat there flipping through the magazine on the table, her eyes filled with gentleness. She hadn't changed much over the years. She was still so innocent. In that way, when she saw someone in front of her, she raised her head. When she met Huo Jinyao's face, she smiled gently. "Jinyao, you're here?" Huo Jinyao nodded and sat down opposite her. Qi Shiwei didn't close the magazine in her hand. She just turned her face and looked at Huo Jinyao. "I haven't seen you for so many years, but you're still the same." "Really? You're the same." Speaking of which, he hadn't seen Qi Shiwei for nearly 8 years. Qi Shiwei curved the corners of her lips, and the smile on her face didn't diminish. "I'm not the same. I'm old and haggard. You're younger than me. If you say you're old, won't I be older?" "It's different. Women always age faster." Qi Shiwei's voice seemed to be emotional, but it was only for a moment. She quickly changed the topic. "By the way, what do you want to drink?" "A latte." "Your taste hasn't changed much." As Qi Shiwei spoke, she called the waiter over and ordered a latte for Huo Jinyao. She ordered a glass of juice for herself. "I remember you like Blue Mountain?" "Yes. But I can't drink coffee now. I've already quit." Qi Shiwei ordered another 2 sets of snacks. Only then did she put away the magazine and put it aside. "Quit." Huo Jinyao looked at her expression as if he didn't understand. "By the way, how have you been these few years?" "Not bad. I know you're married. You should be quite happy, right?" "Yes. That's good." A sincere smile appeared on Qi Shiwei's face. "I thought you'd be very busy. I didn't expect you to have the time to look for me." Huo Jinyao didn't deny it. "I'm indeed very busy, but I have something to ask you." As he spoke, he took out the document from his briefcase and pushed it in front of Qi Shiwei. This. Qi Shiwei looked at the document and flipped through it. She closed the document and looked at Huo Jinyao in confusion. "Have you guys already started? This plan isn't bad, right?" "Very good." Huo Jinyao looked at Qi Shiwei and praised her generously. "If it can really be implemented, it will bring huge long-term benefits to the group. It's good that it can help you." Qi Shiwei smiled. The smile on her face was very pure. Huo Jinyao looked at her and put away the plan. "Unfortunately, this plan doesn't help me now." "Ha!" Qi Shiwei was stunned for a moment, as if she didn't quite understand what Huo Jinyao meant. Why can't it help you?" "Shiwei, can you tell me why you gave me this plan? If I remember correctly, with your major and what you've learned, such a plan is also very beneficial to you and your company." "I know. But now, I don't have the energy to care about it." Qi Shiwei bit her lip and said softly, "I'm very optimistic about such a plan. But I don't have enough energy, so I can't continue. In my heart, you're the most suitable candidate. I feel that if I let you do such a plan, you'll definitely make it work to the fullest." "Thank you, Shiwei. Thank you for thinking so highly of me. But the question is, why didn't you come to me personally and give me this plan?" Qi Shiwei lowered her head as if a little embarrassed. "I did. I went to Chanyu Group to look for you, but they said you weren't there. Then I met your sister-in-law. She said that you went to Sea City and wouldn't be back so soon, so I gave the document to her and asked her to pass it to you." Huo Jinyao pursed his lips into a straight line. He was a little helpless at Qi Shiwei's rash actions. "Are you very familiar with her? You gave her such an important thing?" "I'm not very familiar with her. But I met her when she was in the United States. I knew that she was the daughter of the Li family in Lin City. I happened to see the video of your anniversary celebration. Now that she's married to your cousin, your family. So when she said she could pass it to you, I gave it to her." "Shiwei, Huo Jinyao didn't expect Su Peijian's perfect plan to come from this way. I remember that you weren't such a simple person in the past." "Yes. I also feel that I've changed a lot." Qi Shiwei smiled, looking a little uncomfortable. "But there's nothing I can do. This is a special period. Not only can I not keep up with my energy, but sometimes my thoughts can't keep up either." "Special period?" This time it was Huo Jinyao's turn to be confused. Qi Shiwei smiled. "That's right. I'm pregnant." "So," she didn't finish her sentence. She had been sitting and holding a magazine in her hand, so Hu Jinyao didn't pay attention to this. Because of her words, Hu Jinyao looked down at her abdomen. Only then did he realize that Qi Shiwei's abdomen was already bulging. She did look pregnant. Jinyao, to tell you the truth, ever since I got pregnant, my spirit has been much worse and my temper is also sometimes good and sometimes bad. You're right. Originally, I planned to carry out this plan in my own company. But because my mood hasn't been very stable recently, my boss asked me to hand this plan over to someone else. I was very unhappy and had an argument with my boss. After the argument, I was angry and annoyed. I didn't want my boss to benefit, so I decided to give this plan to you. I only found out that you were married when I returned home. After thinking about it, I didn't have any other gift to give me. I've been working on this plan for a long time, and it's barely presentable. I wanted to give it to you as a wedding gift. Qi Shiwei seemed a little embarrassed when she said this. I originally wanted to give this to you personally. But the last time I went to your company to look for you, you weren't there. My low blood pressure came back again. It was your sister-in-law who sent me to the hospital. At that time, the plan happened to be in her car. Later, she said that she would give it to you. I happened to be feeling unwell, so I naturally gave it to her. She finished explaining the process, but she didn't understand what was going on. She didn't give it to you? Then why is this with you now? Everything was clear. Hu Jinyao was silent for more than 10 seconds. Qi Shiwei's expression turned ugly again. Did I do something wrong? What happened? Tell me. Shiwei, can you do me a favor? Of course. You know, as long as it's your matter, I'm willing to help. She didn't finish her sentence, but Hu Jinyao understood what she meant. Yes, Qi Shiwei was like this. She was always very enthusiastic. She used to be like this when she was in school and she was still like this after she left school. Let me thank you in advance. Hu Jinyao didn't say what it was. He looked at Qi Shiwei with a hint of concern in his eyes. Alright, you're married. Does your husband treat you well? We broke up. Qi Shiwei shook her head and didn't want to talk about it anymore. I'm alone now. Hu Jinyao was a little stunned by this random sentence. When he saw Qi Shiwei's normal expression as if she couldn't be any better, he didn't know what to say. But aren't you pregnant now? Yes. I know I'm pregnant. As Qi Shiwei spoke, she lowered her head and placed one hand on her abdomen. At that moment, her expression was rather gentle. I know I'm pregnant. This is my child. If his father doesn't want him, I'll want him. Hu Jinyao was a little surprised that she didn't seem to care. After thinking for a while, he spoke very seriously. Shiwei, we're friends. If you need my help, you must tell me. Thank you. Qi Shiwei smiled at him. But I don't need it now. I'm fine like this. She thought of what Hu Jinyao had said just now. By the way, you said that you needed my help with something. May I ask what's the matter? Hu Jinyao glanced at the proposal. There was a flash of malice in his eyes, but he didn't show it in front of Qi Shiwei. When Hu Jinyao entered the company, it happened to be Monday. There was a regular Monday meeting today. Hu Yifan had already been kicked out and wasn't qualified to attend, but because of the recent proposal, he sat in the conference room again and occupied a seat inside. When he saw Hu Jinyao and Yang Wenchang get up together, the corners of his lips curled up slightly, and a look of pride and arrogance flashed across his eyes. When Yang Wenchang saw it, his face darkened and he couldn't help but look at Hu Jinyao. Hu Jinyao, on the other hand, acted as if nothing had happened. He walked to the top seat and sat down at the first seat at the conference table. The seat at the top was Hu Mingguang's. Ever since Hu Jinyao and Hu Mingguang parted on bad terms, Hu Jinyao hadn't gone to look for Hu Mingguang in the past few days. He didn't have any business matters to talk to Hu Mingguang about. The father and son worked at the Tianyu Group every day, but they didn't meet even once. Thinking about it, it was really ironic. Soon Hu Mingguang arrived. It wasn't just him. There was also Hu Mingliang. The two of them entered the conference room one after another. They sat down at the head of the table. Hu Mingguang glanced at Hu Jinyao. If one looked carefully, one would find a flash of guilt in his eyes. But it was only for a moment. Soon he looked at the people in front of him. He announced the start of the regular meeting. There wasn't much to hear in the first place. It was about the daily matters of the company and the progress of some big cases. Hu Jinyao supported his chin with one hand, as if he was listening to the reports of these people seriously. From time to time he would look at Hu Mingguang. In the past he wouldn't attend such a regular meeting every time. Today he was listening especially seriously. When he looked at Hu Mingliang again, his face was full of pride. He couldn't hide it. There was also Hui Yang and Hu Manzi, who were sitting next to Hu Yifan. They covered up the dejection that Hu Yifan had when he was kicked out of the Tianyu group a while ago. They looked more or less proud. Hu Jingyao admired their expressions. He knew in his heart that such pride. It wasn't long. It was only today. After today he was confident that Hu Yifan would never be able to be proud again. Soon it was Hu Yifan's turn to speak. What he wanted to talk about was the project that he was currently working on. When it was Hu Yifan's turn to speak, Hu Mingliang's eyes lit up. He looked at Hu Yifan, his pride evident in his words. It wasn't just him. Weren't the Hu siblings the same? This plan was indeed very good, Hu Jingyao admitted. Qi Shiwei looked soft and weak, but she was very capable. In fact, after she graduated, Hu Jingyao had thought of letting her enter the Tianyu group. However, Qi Shiwei refused. She chose to stay in the United States. A few years ago he had almost no contact with her. If it weren't for this incident, he would have followed the clues given by Yang Wenchang and discovered that Hu Yifan's plan was actually given to him by Su Peijian. Su Peijian, on the other hand, had actually managed to get on Qi Shiwei's good side without him knowing. He also wouldn't know that Qi Shiwei had returned to the country because of her boss's business philosophy and design philosophy regarding some new products. She had been back for a while. Previously her health wasn't good, so she stayed at home to recuperate. At the same time she changed the plan in her hands. It wasn't until later that she felt that it was perfect and could be taken out. That was why she came to look for him. This plan, which was originally a wedding gift from Qi Shiwei, had somehow fallen into Su Peijian's hands. Su Peijian, that woman. His previous punishment of her was still too light. This time he could deal with both Hu Yifan and Su Peijian at the same time. At that moment, Hu Yifan was speaking with confidence. He was quite confident in the case he was currently working on. Half of this confidence came from the perfect plan. The other half was because he was confident in his own abilities. He believed that this time he would definitely be able to make a beautiful comeback. When he thought of this he couldn't help but look at Hu Jingyao. His expression was proud and provocative. Hu Jingyao acted as if he didn't see it. He lowered his head to look at the time. It should be about time. The moment he raised his head, the door of the conference room was opened. Zhang Yin walked in front. When he saw the person inside he finally looked at Hu Jingyao. President Hua? Hu Jingyao curled his lips. Very good. He was here. The show was about to begin. Zhang Yan's appearance made everyone look at him. They also saw the person standing behind him. Chapter 605. Secretary Zhang. Hu Mingguang frowned. He was about to speak, but he saw that there were two people behind Zhang Yang. Two people in uniform. Everyone present sat there motionlessly. They just looked at the two people and didn't understand why the police were here. Hu Yifan stood there and watched the two people walk straight toward him. One of them flashed the ID in his hand in front of Hu Yifan. Hello, are you Mr. Hu Yifan? I am. Hu Yifan stood there with a confused expression. The police officer put away the ID. You are suspected of being involved in a case of stealing trade secrets. Please come with us and assist in the investigation. Hu Yifan instinctively took a step back. What nonsense are you talking about? Who stole trade secrets? Please cooperate with us and assist in the investigation. Hu Yifan stood there and subconsciously looked at Hu Mingliang. Hu Mingliang was also confused. He took 2 steps forward. Police officer, is there a misunderstanding here? My son would never steal trade secrets. So please come with us and assist in the investigation. The police officer still sounded professional, but his actions were not polite at all. He took 2 steps forward and stood on both sides of Hu Yifan, wanting to take him away. Hu Yifan looked at Hu Mingguang again. Uncle, save me. I didn't. Hu Mingguang looked at the scene in front of him and subconsciously glanced at Hu Jingyao. Zhang Yang was Hu Jinyao's man. It was Zhang Yang who brought him in. Did this have anything to do with Hu Jingyao? Hu Yifan also saw Hu Jinyao's gaze. He suddenly pointed at Hu Jingyao. It's you, isn't it? It's you. You're the one who hurt me. Hu Jingyao, you're jealous. You can't bear to see me do well. Hu Jingyao touched the tip of his nose. Finally he met Hu Yifan's eyes. Manager Hua, please think twice before you speak. I don't have the ability to let the police arrest you. If you think you're innocent, go with them. After all, the police will find out the truth of the matter and prove your innocence. Don't you think so? Hu Jingyao, it's you. Hu Yifan still wanted to curse, but he was already taken away by 2 police officers. After he was taken away, Hu Mingguang and Hu Mingliang both looked at Hu Jingyao. Nephew, that's not very kind of you. Hu Mingliang looked at Hu Jingyao with silent criticism in his eyes. Uncle, I don't quite understand what you're saying. It was Yifan who committed the crime. What does it have to do with me? Hu Jingyao pushed the matter aside as if it had nothing to do with him. Hu Mingliang was furious. Nephew Gu, don't you feel guilty saying this? The police were all brought here by your people. Are you trying to say that it has nothing to do with you? Hearing this, Hu Jingyao smiled slightly and turned to look at Zhang Yang. Zhang Yin. Did you bring him here? No. Zhang Yin waved a document in his hand as he spoke. I was looking for President Hua, and I happened to see those two police officers coming upstairs. They said they were looking for manager Hu Yifan. I happened to be on my way to the conference room. Uncle, did you hear that? This matter has nothing to do with me. Come to think of it, I'm really curious. Yifan stole trade secrets. What kind of trade secrets did he steal? No one present had expected this. When they heard Hu Jinyao's words, they looked at each other. Hu Mingguang's expression was very ugly. He sat there with a cold face and looked at Hu Jinyao. He didn't believe that this matter had nothing to do with him. Hu Jinyao acted as if he didn't see his father's expression. He just looked at Hu Mingliang and said, Uncle, if I were you, I wouldn't stay here now. Instead, I would find a way to find out what trade secrets Yifan stole. Hu Mingliang glared at Hu Jinyao. He wanted to lose his temper, but he knew that what he said was the truth. After glaring at Hu Jinyao with hatred, he quickly left. The meeting couldn't continue at this point. Hu Mingguang waved his hand, and the others in the conference room dispersed. In the end, only Hu Jinyao and Hu Mingguang were left. Hu Mingguang stopped Hu Jinyao before he left. Jinyao. Hu Jinyao stood there and looked at him with an unruly expression. You, he said the word you and changed the topic. Hu Yifan's matter was your doing. He used an affirmative sentence. Hu Jinyao smiled. Don't you have an answer? Why are you still asking? Hu Mingguang's expression was complicated. He looked at Hu Jinyao and didn't know what to say for a moment. Jinyao, I know that your mother and I owe you a lot. You're indignant. If you're really that unhappy, you can come at us. But I hope you can take the overall situation into account. No matter what, Yifan is your younger brother and also a member of the Tianyu group. Aren't you afraid that your actions will affect the company's reputation? You're thinking too much. Hu Jinyao patiently listened to him finish his words. There was a hint of mockery in his voice. First of all, I don't have any resentment towards you and mother. You can treat me however you like as long as you're happy. Second, it's not me who will affect the company's reputation, it's Hu Yifan. Perhaps you can ask him where that perfect plan came from and how it came about. When the time comes, you can discuss the company's reputation with me. After saying this, Hu Jinyao left. He completely ignored Hu Mingguang, who was behind him. He was left sitting there with a complicated expression on his face. There was a faint hint of guilt on his face. When Hu Yifan was taken away, he was quite confident. But soon he realized that he couldn't be confident anymore. A company in the United States called Cave Company filed a lawsuit against Hu Yifan through a lawyer, accusing him of stealing trade secrets. And the so-called trade secret was the document that Su Peijian had given him. The other party repeatedly asked him to explain where the document came from. Hu Yifan could only tell the truth. It was given by Su Peijian. Su Peijian was in Lin City. After she lost so much face in Lin City, she didn't immediately return to Rong City. Instead, he led a befuddled life in Lin City for 2 days. But soon she was arrested. The police brought her from Lin City to Rong City. The charges against her were the same: theft of trade secrets. Su Peijian hadn't recovered from that blow yet. She didn't expect to face such charges immediately. Of course she wouldn't admit it. She said that the document was given to her by Qi Shiwei. She didn't steal it at all. But no one wanted to believe her. She was locked up. Not only was she locked up, but she was also interrogated with Hu Yifan. She said that the proposal was given to her by Qi Shiwei, but Qi Shiwei refused to admit it. She said that's such an important thing, how could she give it to someone so casually? Especially since it was a confidential document from her original company. Su Peijian couldn't defend herself. She called a lawyer she knew and wanted him to bail her out. But it was useless. The other party told her that her case was irrefutable and there was no way to turn the tables. On the other side, Su Peijian and Hu Yifan were locked up. On the other side, Hu Mingliang was trying his best to get Hu Yifan out. Hu Yifan went to prison and the case was put on hold. This was also a loss for the company. Hu Mingliang didn't know about the plan. He had always thought that Hu Yifan had done it himself. Only now did he know that Hu Yifan hadn't done the plan himself. He had no choice but to beg old Master Hua. On the other side, the police had officially filed a complaint against Hui Yifan and Su Peijian. If convicted, the two of them would face a limited sentence of more than 3 years and less than 7 years. Whether it was 3 years or 7 years, Hua Mingliang couldn't afford it. In desperation, he could only look for old Master Hua to plead for mercy. Su Qingsang returned to the hospital to work. She was extremely busy every day. Naturally, she didn't know about these things about Tianyu Group. She only knew that Hua Jinyao had been very busy recently and often returned home very late at night. Coincidentally, she was also on the night shift this week. In Auntie Yu's words, the two of them hadn't eaten at home for a few days. It wasn't easy for Su Qingsang to not be on duty that day and go home early. Only then did she realize that Hua Jinyao hadn't returned yet. She was a little disappointed, but Su Qingsang knew Hua Jinyao's recent situation. Although he said that he had a way to deal with Hui Yifan, her grandfather would probably stop him when the time came. If Hua Jinyao insisted on doing things his own way, he would inevitably make his grandfather unhappy again. She couldn't help him with these things, so she could only not cause him trouble. Hua Jinyao didn't come back until she was done packing and lying down in a daze. The bed beside her suddenly sunk and made her blink. She hadn't turned off the bedside lamp before. Now that she saw Hua Jinyao, she reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. "You're back." "Yes." Hua Jinyao nodded and looked at Su Qingsang, who was still sleepy. At this time she looked a little confused. "Why are you so late? Do you have a lot of work to do?" "Yes." Hua Jinyao nodded. Su Qingsang looked at him with a little heartache and patted his shoulder. "All right, go take a shower and sleep early." Hua Jinyao didn't object. He leaned over and kissed her on the lips again before retreating. Su Qingsang smiled and blinked her eyes. Just as she was about to go to sleep, she smelled an extremely faint scent that resembled perfume. She couldn't help but sniff it hard again. The smell was gone. She looked at Hua Jinyao and found that he had also turned his face to look at her. "Qingsang." His expression was a little serious. "What's wrong?" "If Auntie comes to see you and asks for something, you can ask her to come to me. Don't agree to any of her requests." Hua Jinyao was naturally referring to Kaiping. Su Qingsang was completely awake because of his words. "Auntie came to see me? Why did she come to see me? What happened? Did Su Peijian return to Rong City? Isn't she still in Lin City?" She had been back for about a week. During this week, she had already stopped thinking about what Su Peijian had done. Her reputation was ruined anyway. She thought that Su Peijian wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. Could it be that she was still thinking of harming people? "Don't worry, it's not what you think. Su Peijian is in prison now." Under Su Qingsang's shocked expression, Hua Jinyao briefly told her what Su Peijian had done. "Don't worry, this time I will definitely ask them to sentence her to the high court. They will not let her out unless she is locked up for 7 years. Su Qingsang didn't say anything. Su Peijian deserved to end up like this today. However, she couldn't help but sympathize with Xiang Kaiping. "Auntie will probably come to me to plead for her, right?" "Yes, Auntie will probably come to you to plead for her. So I hope that no matter what Auntie says, you don't care. Just ask her to come to me." "I got it." Su Qingsang responded in a very low voice. Her expression didn't look too good. She couldn't help Su Peijian's matter and she didn't want to help. She had repeatedly gone against her and even tried to harm her. If she still spoke up for Su Peijian, she would be too much of a saint. However, in the end she still sympathized with Xiang Kaiping. With a daughter like that, Xiang Kaiping would probably feel a headache and pain, right? Because of this matter, Su Qingsang suddenly forgot that she had smelled a faint perfume just now. In the study, the atmosphere was a little tense. "Impossible." Hua Jinyao threw out these 3 words after hearing Old Master Hua's request. Old Master Hua didn't expect Hua Jinyao to refuse so directly, not even giving him any face. "Jinyao, can't you let your brother go?" "I'm sorry, I can't. Everything else could be discussed, but this was the only thing that Hua Jinyao would never compromise on." "Jinyao." Old Master Hua was a little annoyed by his attitude. "What do you think? As long as you can find a way to get Cave's people to withdraw the charges, I'll make the decision and send Hui Yifan and the others abroad. I promise I won't let them come back again. How about that?" "No." Hua Jinyao smiled and shook his head. He didn't accept Old Master Hua's words at all. "No, you can't send them abroad. Why would they go abroad? Continue to enjoy life? Grandpa, that's not what I want. I promise you I won't give them any help. They need to support themselves abroad. By their own strength. Grandpa, if you've decided, What's the difference in letting them stay in prison and reflect on their own mistakes? Old Master Hua's lips moved. He wanted to defend Hu Yifan, but Hu Jinyao didn't want to stay any longer. He stood up and looked at Old Master Hua. His expression was respectful, but he didn't have the slightest intention of backing down. Old Master Hua's face was a little pale. He couldn't bear to think of Hua Mingliang, who had come to beg him, and cried, "Grandpa, if there's nothing else, I'll leave first. By the way, speaking of which, you've completely let my father handle the company's matters. Since that's the case, you don't have to worry about it anymore. What do you think?" Old Master Hua's expression was no longer just ugly. Hua Jinyao was clearly telling him not to worry about the company's matters anymore. You, Old Master Hua clutched his chest angrily. He pointed at Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao bowed. "Grandpa, it's better to take care of your health. Hu Yifan has always said that he's very filial. If he's really filial, he won't do these things that hurt the company's reputation again and again. So this time, Grandpa, it's better if you don't interfere." Chapter 606. This was a somewhat remote villa in Rong City. It was a 3.5-story villa. It wasn't particularly big, but the environment was elegant and the surroundings were very quiet. The distance between the houses was also quite far, so the privacy was very good. Outside in the garden, there was a small white carved table. Hua Jinyao sat on a rattan chair next to him and looked at Qi Shiwei, who was pouring juice into his glass. "I'm sorry. I gave up coffee when I got pregnant and now we only have juice at home." "It's okay. I'm not here to drink." Hua Jinyao looked at her and found that her face was much paler than it had been 2 days ago. "Are you okay? You don't look too well." "No." Qi Shiwei filled the glass with juice and retracted her hand. She looked at Hua Jinyao. "It's normal. Because of pregnancy there will be some changes." Hua Jinyao looked at Qi Shiwei. He didn't really believe her. "Is it really unrelated to that shot back then?" Qi Shiwei was stunned for a moment before she suddenly smiled. "What are you thinking? Of course not." She picked up the glass of juice in front of her and took a sip. Her voice was very soft. "It's been so long I've forgotten about it. It's hard for you to remember." "How could I not remember? Of course I will." There was guilt and pity in Hua Jinyao's eyes. In this life, other than his brother and sister, the only person he felt guilty about was Qi Shiwei. Hua Jinyao used to study at Yale. There were many Chinese in their school, but Qi Shiwei was not only Chinese, but also from Rong City. By chance, Hua Jinyao got to know Qi Shiwei. Both of them were Chinese and they were from Rong City. Qi Shiwei got closer to Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao was a very diligent and hard-working person. He put all his energy into his studies. However, Qi Shiwei was also very capable. She could be considered one of the few girls who could follow his train of thought in both business and academics. This made Hua Jinyao, who originally only wanted to keep a distance from Qi Shiwei, feel a little more admiration for her. As time went by, the relationship between the two of them improved quite a bit. Some of the students who knew about their relationship even thought that Hua Jinyao and Qi Shiwei were a couple. However, only Hua Jinyao and Qi Shiwei knew that they weren't lovers. They were just a couple who had a pretty good relationship. Qi Shiwei looked weak on the surface. However, his heart was firm. She had a similar experience as Hua Jinyao. She was born into a scholarly family. Her mother was a professor at Z University and her father was the president of a bank. Growing up in such an environment, her ability was naturally very strong. But like Hua Jinyao, she also had an unfortunate past. Her mother was a professor and had the temperament of a scholar. Unfortunately, her father was the vice president of the bank. Father is busy with work. He was far more concerned about the gains and losses and his own future than his family. As a professor, her mother had always supported her father's work wholeheartedly. But she didn't expect that her excessive trust in him had led to her father's indulgence. Qi Shiwei's father later made the mistake that all men in the world would make. He fell in love with another woman. That woman was his secretary. After Qi Shiwei's mother found out about this, it was useless to make a fuss. She calmly expressed that she wanted a divorce. However, Father Qi happened to be facing a promotion at that time. He did not want to cause such a scandal and was unwilling to divorce. Qi Shiwei's mother was in no mood to endure it. After collecting evidence of Father Qi's infidelity, she planned to negotiate with Father Qi. Unexpectedly, she got into a car accident halfway. When she was sent to the hospital, she had already died. At that time, Qi Shiwei was only a 12-year-old girl. Her mother suddenly left, and not long after, her father brought the secretary home and became her stepmother. With a stepmother there would be a stepfather. Her father, who had once doted on her in every possible way, gradually drifted apart after her stepmother entered the family. After her younger brother was born, her status plummeted. It was also because of this that Qi Shiwei went to the United States to study alone at a young age. After knowing what she had been through, Hu Jingyao sympathized with her because they were in the same boat. Although his parents weren't born later, they weren't much different from them. More importantly, the turning point in their lives seemed to be at the age of 12. He didn't have any romantic feelings for Qi Shiwei, but he felt a sense of pity and appreciation that surpassed that of a boyfriend and girlfriend. It was the same for Qi Shiwei. Unlike Hu Jingyao, she had been thinking of ways to avenge her mother. After so many years, she had always suspected that her mother's death wasn't simple. She didn't believe that it was such a coincidence that her mother had a car accident just as she was about to divorce her father. The hateful thing was that she was too young back then and couldn't do anything about it. When she grew up, she left Rong City. After meeting Hu Jingyao, the two of them interacted more and more. Finally, one day she couldn't help but tell Hu Jingyao about herself. Hu Jingyao's ability was above hers. She believed that he had the ability to find out. Sure enough, Hu Jingyao quickly helped her find out that her secretary's stepmother had tampered with the car. Qi Shiwei unceremoniously sent her to prison and at the same time, made a big deal out of the matter. This caused her father to take joint responsibility. In the end, Qi Shiwei's father lost his job and her stepmother went to prison. After settling all of this, Qi Shiwei returned to Yale to continue her studies. Hu Jingyao helping Qi Shiwei was just a small matter. He felt that it was just a matter of convenience. However, Qi Shiwei believed that she owed him one. Hu Jingyao had many girls in school. Qi Shiwei was rumored to be his girlfriend, but before the person in question came out to confirm it, those girls felt that they still had a chance. Qi Shiwei felt that she owed Hu Jingyao this once, so she automatically took up the responsibility of blocking those peach blossoms for Hu Jingyao. Her looks were very popular in the eyes of Europeans and Americans, and she also had many suitors. Similarly, she also used Hu Jingyao to block those suitors. However, such a mutually beneficial event was not enough to make Qi Shiwei feel that she had to repay Hu Jingyao for his help. She had always wanted to repay Hu Jingyao once. Hu Jingyao had always known what she was thinking, but he had never taken it to heart. The Hua family had a lot of resources, so helping Qi Shiwei solve this kind of problem was a matter of minutes. However, he didn't expect Qi Shiwei to be so serious, and he really seized the opportunity. That Christmas, the two of them were invited by a classmate to attend that classmate's party. Before going, Hu Jingyao first went to pick up Qi Shiwei, and then the two of them planned to buy a gift for that classmate. When the two of them went to buy the gift, there was a terrorist attack on that street, the famous local shopping street. Everything happened in an instant. It was so fast that it caught people off guard. There was no way to defend against it at all. Gunshots rang out. Hu Jingyao looked at the few people who were shooting wildly in the distance. Just as he was thinking of protecting Qi Shiwei and bringing her into the nearest shop to hide, Qi Shiwei suddenly pounced on him with her eyes wide open. Be careful. Qi Shiwei's movements were too fast. She successfully pounced on Hu Jingyao. At the same time, she let out a muffled groan. Behind Hu Jingyao there was actually another car. Two people got out of it and were about to shoot in their direction when Qi Shiwei happened to see it. Shiwei. The gunshots continued, but Hu Jingyao couldn't care less. He didn't expect Qi Shiwei to choose to repay him in such a way. In fact, he wasn't easy to get along with. Even though he had known Qi Shiwei for so long and the two of them were even a couple on the surface, he only admired her a little more. They weren't really close to each other. However, Qi Shiwei made such a choice at such a time. Qi Shiwei was shot in the back of her waist and blood flowed profusely. Hu Jingyao didn't know where she was injured. The constant gunshots outside made it impossible for him to even send Qi Shiwei to the doctor. He carried Qi Shiwei into the nearest shop. He looked at Qi Shiwei's pale face and felt a rare sense of guilt. The bullet had passed through Qi Shiwei's uterus. When she was sent to the hospital, she went into shock. She was finally rescued. The doctor told Hu Jingyao that Qi Shiwei's uterus had been pierced by a bullet. Although she had been rescued, it might have a certain impact on Qi Shiwei's later pregnancy. The doctor didn't say how severe the impact would be. After all, everyone's physique was different. It would also depend on her recovery later. The doctor was more conservative. In fact, even if foreign doctors didn't know much about China, they could understand that Chinese men had their own obsession with children. This time, it was Hu Jingyao's turn to blame himself. He didn't expect Qi Shiwei to repay his favor in such a way. Now Hu Jingyao was the one who owed her. He felt that he owed Qi Shiwei. After she was discharged from the hospital, He told Qi Shiwei that he wanted to become a real boyfriend and girlfriend with her. Jinyao, stop fooling around. You don't love me at all. You just sympathize with me. It's not sympathy. Not only sympathy but also appreciation, guilt, and other things. Of course, Jinyao himself knew that there was no love in these feelings. Jinyao, then look into my eyes and tell me that you love me. Jinyao looked into her eyes. He really couldn't say the words I love you. He knew very well that there was no love between the two of them. But even so, Jinyao's guilt couldn't be erased for a while. He defined himself as Qi Shiwei's boyfriend. In life, he would do his best to take care of her in all aspects. Qi Shiwei knew how he felt, so she didn't stop him from reducing his guilt. However, when Jinyao asked her to go home and meet his parents after graduation, Jinyao's heart sank. Qi Shiwei was shocked. Not only did Jinyao not love her, but she also didn't love Jinyao. She couldn't let Jinyao take her home. They both knew that their feelings for each other were not yet lovers, but more than friendship. But it was far from the point where they could spend the rest of their lives together. So Qi Shiwei ran away. She left a letter for Jinyao and left. She told Jinyao that if he really wanted her well, he shouldn't look for her or contact her again. It was the best outcome for them to be happy with each other. This was her request. Although Jinyao didn't agree with Qi Shiwei's choice, he really did as she wished and didn't contact her again. If this was what she wanted, then he was willing to fulfill her wish. In a flash, nearly 8 years had passed. He didn't expect that the two of them would meet again. Actually, you don't need to remember. Qi Shiwei's words made Jinyao retract his thoughts. Other than her pale face, the Qi Shiwei in front of him looked no different from 8 years ago. I think that's good. After all, that means we're even. How could they be even? What he did for her was just a small favor. But what she did for him was to save his life. Jinyao didn't want to argue with her. If you want to say that, then I owe you again this time. Jinyao, you really don't think that way. As Qi Shiwei spoke, she yawned, her face full of sleepiness. Ever since I got pregnant, I've become very sleepy and I'm not in good spirits. I really don't have the ability to finish that case. In addition, I just happened to return to the country, so I wanted you to do it. I know your dream. I know you want to take Tianyu Group to the next level. It's still my fault that something like that happened in the middle. So, you really don't have to say anything else. Jinyao didn't say another word of thanks. He just looked at Qi Shiwei with a guilty, grateful, and pitiful expression. How's your body? Why do I feel like you're in a particularly bad state? No, it's just a little easier to get sleepy than ordinary people. You said last time that you broke up with your husband. Does he know that you're pregnant? If he knows, why didn't he take care of you? Since we've broken up, there's no need for him to take care of me. This was the second time she had used the word break up instead of divorce. Jinyao thought about the difference between the words break up and divorce. Even if we broke up, you're pregnant now. No matter what, he should take care of you. Don't come. Qi Shiwei's expression was indifferent. When she mentioned that person, there was a flash of disgust in her expression. If he doesn't come, I'll be a little more at ease. If he comes, I'm afraid I'll be even more uncomfortable. Shiwei, that person doesn't treat you well? Can we not talk about him? Qi Shiwei changed the topic. I've already asked the lawyer because this case involves a huge amount of money. In addition, this case also involves a foreign company. I believe that your cousin and Su Peijian will definitely get a heavier sentence. When the time comes, you can talk to the lawyer and definitely make them stay in prison for a little longer. Shiwei, don't worry about these things. Anyway, I really want to thank you this time. Jinyao, look at you. You're still so polite to me. Am I not your friend in your heart? Of course. Since we're friends, there's no need to talk about those things. As Qi Shiwei spoke, she yawned again. I'm sorry, I might not be able to entertain you anymore. I seem to be sleepy again. I need to sleep for a while. Okay. You go and rest first. Jinyao stood up and planned to leave. Since they were friends, there was no need to keep saying those words of gratitude. It was fine to keep them in mind. I know there are some things you don't want to tell me, but if there's anything you need help with, you must ask. Don't worry. I will. Qi Shiwei stood up, but her head was dizzy. She fell to the side as if she had lost all her strength. Jinyao quickly held her up. Shiwei, are you okay? I'm fine. Qi Shiwei shook her head. She didn't tell Jinyao that her condition wasn't very good. She had worked too hard for her to conceive this child. Her physical condition actually didn't allow her to conceive this child at all. However, she still insisted on doing it. Now she had tasted the bitter fruit and she couldn't tell anyone about the process. I'll send you back to your room to rest. Okay, sorry to trouble you. As Qi Shiwei spoke, her face looked even paler. Huo Jinyao wanted to ask, but he knew that Qi Shiwei wouldn't tell the truth. He decided to ask Yang Wenchang to investigate later. If possible, he was willing to do his best to help Qi Shiwei. Su Qingsang was prepared by Huo Jinyao. She knew that Xiang Kaiping might come to look for her. Therefore, when Xiang Kaiping appeared in front of her, she wasn't surprised at all. Andy? Xiang Kaiping looked at Su Qingsang with a complicated expression. Ever since she fell out with Su Peijian last time, she forced herself to stop caring about Su Peijian and not care about anything about Su Peijian. After that, Su Peijian seemed to have disappeared. She went to the company, and her old subordinate told her that Su Peijian hadn't been there for a long time. She knew that with Su Peijian's pride, she would definitely not have anything to do with her after falling out with her. She wanted to call Su Peijian, but she didn't want to put down her pride first. She thought that she had given Su Peijian the same amount of sincerity as Su Qingsang. However, Su Peijian didn't appreciate it. She still wanted to return to the Su family and return to Li Qianshua's side. Who was Li Qianshua? She was the culprit who stole her man and caused her to be lonely for half her life. She couldn't forgive Li Qianshua, and she couldn't accept that her daughter wanted to be with Li Qianshua. She forced herself to harden her heart and not contact Su Peijian again. Even if she really couldn't bear it, she had to wait for Su Peijian to lower her head and admit her mistake. However, Xiang Kaiping didn't wait for Su Peijian to lower her head or come back to admit her mistake. She waited for the police. When she found out that Su Peijian was arrested for stealing trade secrets and that the trade secrets Su Peijian stole were related to the Chanyu group, she could roughly guess that Su Peijian must have done something to Su Qingsang. Moreover, she must have done something very serious, something that could even be said to have seriously hurt Su Qingsang. With the little kindness that Huo Jinyao and Su Qingsang had for her, even if Su Peijian really did something, if it was only a small matter, they believed that Su Qingsang would definitely not hold it against her. Since she was arrested, it could only mean that it was a very serious matter. She could guess all these things, so at first she didn't think of looking for Su Qingsang. Instead, she first found a lawyer. However, after she asked the lawyer about Su Peijian's possible outcome, she finally couldn't help but look for Su Qingsang after struggling at home for 2 days. Andy? Su Qingsang looked at the time. There was still about 10 minutes before she got off work. Wait for me. I'll pack my things. It's okay, it's okay. I'll wait for you. Chapter 607. The restaurant was decorated in a southern style and was very unique. Su Qingsang and Xiang Kaiping sat facing each other by the window. The waiter brought the menu over. Su Qingsang asked Xiang Kaiping to order, but she was not in the mood. She waved her hand and pushed the menu back to Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang did not refuse. She ordered a few dishes, all of which were Xiang Caiping's favorites. She had unintentionally revealed these feelings when she was in Lin City. Su Qingsang still remembered it. Xiang Kaiping sat there without moving. The words she wanted to say were stuck in her throat because of Su Qingsang's actions. How have you been recently? Previously you went to Sea City. I only heard about the earthquake later and I was very worried about you. I tried calling you but I couldn't get through. After that, I went to your hospital and heard that you were fine. After sitting for a while, Xiang Kaiping finally spoke. Her words were full of concern for Su Qingsang. Yes, there was an earthquake and I almost died. In fact, if it weren't for Zhang Yichen, she would have died a long time ago. Now that everything was fine, she could laugh about the experience of that day. Xiang Kaiping knew that the place was unusual. She heard that hundreds of people died this time. Thousands of people were heavily injured. It's good that you're fine now. It's good that you're fine. Yeah, as long as you're fine. Silence. Su Qingsang felt a little sad. She knew what Xiang Kaiping was here for, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. Xiang Kaiping wanted to say something but hesitated. Finally, when the waiter started to serve the dishes, she didn't say what she wanted to say. Neither of them ate comfortably during the meal. By the time most of the dishes on the table were gone, Su Qingsang put down her chopsticks, feeling a little too full. Xiang Kaiping still didn't say what she wanted to say. Auntie, if there's nothing else, I'll take you home. It's getting late. Let's go home. If we don't go back, it's going to be late. At that time, Auntie Zhao might worry about you. Oh, all right. Xiang Kaiping nodded and followed Su Qingsang into her car. As the night grew darker, Su Qingsang felt Xiang Caiping's gaze on her. Auntie, is your waist better? Has it been hurting lately? No. Su Qingsang gave Xiang Kaiping a physical therapy device. Xiang Kaiping insisted on using it. Recently she really didn't feel any pain anymore. Thinking of this, her expression became complicated. That's good. There was another period of silence. Because of Su Qingsang's concern, Xiang Kaiping couldn't bring herself to say the rest of her words. The criminal was Su Peijian. If the police could lock her up, it might be because she had really done something wrong. If that was the case, what was the point of looking for Su Qingsang? Su Qingsang's car stopped in front of the villa. Xiang Kaiping looked at Su Qingsang and got out of the car without saying a word. Su Qingsang turned the car around, intending to leave just like that. Seeing that Xiang Kaiping was still standing there, staring at her car without moving, Xiang Kaiping's heart was moved. "Auntie." Su Qingsang poked her head out. Xiang Kaiping took a step forward. "Auntie, you're alone here. If there's anything, you can look for me. If you have any difficulties, you can also go to Jinyao." She actually knew that Hua Jinyao didn't intend to let Su Peijian off this time, so this could only be an excuse. If I can't solve it, I believe he should be able to. Hua Jinyao could solve it, but the key was that Hua Jinyao wouldn't help Xiang Kaiping solve it. After saying that, Su Qingsang couldn't bear it anymore. She nodded at Xiang Kaiping, started the car and left. Xiang Kaiping was a smart person. She understood Su Qingsang's meaning almost instantly. She knew why Su Qingsang had looked for her today and understood what she wanted to say, but there was nothing she could do. Xiang Kaiping stood there. Summer had arrived. The wind was not cold, but she felt waves of coldness. This time, was she really going to watch Su Peijian go to jail? When Su Qingsang returned home, she was still in a bad mood. Thinking of Xiang Kaiping, she couldn't bear it. What did Xiang Kaiping do wrong? This tragedy was not caused by her, but Xiang Kaiping was the one who had to bear the final bitter consequences. When she entered the door, Auntie Yu had already cleaned up the house and left. Hua Jinyao had also returned and was on the phone in the living room. Seeing her enter the door, he said a few words and hung up the phone. Su Qingsang changed her shoes and walked to Hua Jinyao's side to sit down. He put his phone aside and looked at her face. "Have you eaten? Are you too tired? You don't look too good." Su Qingsang shook her head and reached out to hug Hua Jinyao, but the moment her body touched Hua Jinyao, her whole body suddenly froze. "Wife." Su Qingsang didn't move, but the tip of her nose twitched. It smelled a bit like perfume. She seemed to have smelled it before. She remembered that night when Hua Jinyao came home, she had smelled the same smell on him. At that time the smell was too faint, so faint that Su Qingsang almost ignored it. But this time she was sensitive enough to smell it. It was clearer than last time. If she guessed correctly, it should be the perfume on a woman's body. "Qingsang?" Hua Jinyao called her again. Su Qingsang sat up straight and her eyes fell on Hua Jinyao's face. She tried to read his face for some sign of guilt, or some other good emotion. But she found nothing. "You, what's wrong with you?" Hua Jinyao looked at her expression and reached out to cover Su Qingsang's forehead. "Are you really not feeling well? Do you want to see a doctor?" "No need." Su Qingsang subconsciously avoided Hua Jinyao's hand and sat back a little. She scratched her head and finally decided to believe Hua Jinyao. "Do you have any social engagements today?" Su Qingsang actually knew that Hua Jinyao usually had a lot of social engagements. However, because he found that she didn't seem to like that kind of environment and occasion, he consciously reduced it. But when she didn't know, the places that Hua Jinyao went to were often not very simple. Not to mention, the charm of night that Hua Jinyao went to was a typical example. Not to mention that he had Qing Xianyun, Wan Xianyang and the others by his side. If it was because the other party had a social engagement and accidentally touched it, Su Qingsang could understand. "Not today." As Hua Jinyao spoke, he pulled her back into his arms and looked at her face. "If I had a social engagement, how could I go home so early?" "No social engagement?" Su Qingsang couldn't help but look at him again. "Then there's nothing special?" "There's one thing." Hua Jinyao remembered that Su Qingsang was an obstetrician. When he came back, he wanted to ask Su Qingsang about this. "What?" "A woman will become very emotional because of pregnancy, and then it's easy to get sleepy. Is there a problem with this?" Su Qingsang blinked. She didn't expect Hua Jinyao to ask her such a question. "Or because she's pregnant, she often wants to sleep, and her body is even weak, as if she will faint at any time?" Hua Jinyao looked at her intently as if he was seriously asking for advice. Su Qingsang's lips moved, but in the end she still spoke. "When a woman is pregnant, her hormone secretion will be out of balance. Then, at this time, the pregnant woman will have some changes. As you said just now, her emotions fluctuate greatly, and it's easy for her to get sleepy. These are all normal. Is it normal for her to want to sleep so easily? Normally speaking, she will indeed be drowsy and weak. This is normal. Is that so? According to Su Qingsang's words, Qi Shiwei's condition was normal, but her face clearly looked so pale, right? Hua Jinyao wanted to ask more, but Su Qingsang looked at him and asked tentatively, "Is there anyone around you who is pregnant?" "Yes, there's one." Hua Jinyao nodded and briefly explained Qi Shiwei's symptoms. "She seems to have been like this recently. So I'm asking you." Su Qingsang bit her lip and nodded gently. She already understood. Hua Jinyao should have gone to see the pregnant woman today. Since she was a pregnant woman, it meant that she had a family, so it was unlikely that she had anything to do with Hua Jinyao. She seems to be very different. I didn't talk to her for long, but she said that she was sleepy, then said that she wanted to sleep, but when she stood up, she couldn't stand steadily. I think maybe one day I'll introduce you to her and you can help her check. Okay. Su Qingsang didn't object, but she roughly knew why Hua Jinyao smelled of perfume. Is this pregnant lady your friend? She's my classmate. Hua Jinyao didn't hide anything. My classmate when I was studying abroad. I've rarely seen a situation like hers. How about this? Let her come to our hospital and I'll give her a detailed examination. Okay. Hua Jinyao nodded and thought of Qi Shiwei's pale face. When he thought of the favor he owed Qi Shiwei, his expression became a little more worried. Su Qingsang looked at him and suddenly held his face, looking into his eyes. Hua Jinyao, this female classmate of yours, could she be your former girlfriend or your secret admirer? Hua Jinyao was stunned. When he met Su Qingsang's overly serious gaze, he suddenly smiled. He wrapped his big hand around her waist and pulled her into his arms. Are you jealous? Su Qingsang blinked. I'm just asking. You just have to tell me yes or no. What if I say yes? There was a faint smile in his eyes. What if I say she's my ex-girlfriend? What will you do? I don't know. It depends on you. On me? Yes. Su Qingsang nodded and raised her hand to poke Hua Jinyao's chest. Her voice was very soft, and her expression looked very calm. However, the voice that came out of her mouth was full of threat. If you don't have feelings for her anymore and only care about her based on your friendship as a classmate, then I'll naturally give her a good examination and help her protect the baby. What if it's not? If you're already married and you still can't forget another woman, then I'll have to be more ruthless. More ruthless? How so? Hua Jinyao's hand slightly exerted force, bringing her body closer to him. That's hard to say. For example, a single mistake could result in one corpse and 2 lives. Who knows? As Su Qingsang spoke, there was already a faint smile in her eyes. Hua Jinyao knew her character. She could treat those who had made things difficult for her with a smile. Now that she said such ruthless words, not only did it not make people think that she was ruthless, but Hua Jinyao felt that Su Qingsang was a little cute. Yes, so ruthless. 1 corpse and 2 lives. I'm so scared. Yes. You're scared, aren't you? Su Qingsang reached out and gently pinched Hua Jinyao's cheek. So, don't mess around outside. After all, you have a wife who is a doctor. Do you understand? I understand. Hua Jinyao liked that she was like this. He hadn't seen it for a long time. Hua Jinyao held her hand and kissed it gently. His voice was especially gentle. Don't worry. There aren't many women who I'm interested in messing around with. It's enough to satisfy you. I won't think about another one. This person was not serious at all. Su Qingsang raised her hand and hit him on the shoulder. That's enough. What nonsense are you talking about? What did he mean by it was enough to deal with her? He made it sound like she was a girl who needed money. That was really enough. Isn't it? As Hua Jinyao spoke, he pressed her down on the sofa. His hands were on both sides of her shoulders. Or do you think I haven't satisfied you? If that's the case, then I have to prove it to you. He lowered his head and gently kissed her lips. Bit by bit he deepened the kiss. Su Qingsang was dizzy from his kiss. She directly forgot what she wanted to say in her original feelings. It wasn't until her clothes were pulled off by Hua Jinyao that she felt a trace of coldness from the air conditioner. She suddenly pushed Hua Jinyao away. Wife. Hua Jinyao was in the midst of his excitement. He was suddenly pushed away and almost fell off the sofa. This made him look at Su Qingsang with a bit of sadness. Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang sat up and looked at the obvious dissatisfaction on his face. She quickly said, Andy came to me today. Hua Jinyao blinked his eyes, and the desire on his face faded a little. She begged you? You agreed? Su Qingsang shook her head quickly, and the expression on her face was still unbearable. She didn't say anything. We had a meal together. She never mentioned Su Peijian. After that, I sent her home. If Xiang Kaiping had really mentioned it, she would have felt a little more comfortable and better. However, Xiang Kaiping didn't mention it. Su Qingsang understood the meaning behind it, and so did Hu Jinyao. Hu Jinyao turned over and sat down beside her. He tore off his tie and tossed it aside. He had long wrapped his arms around Su Qingsang's waist again and let her sit on his lap. Don't blame yourself. Don't feel guilty. This has nothing to do with you. I know. Su Qingsang nodded. She leaned against Hu Jinyao's chest and rubbed her face against it. I understand. I don't want to sympathize with Su Peijian. I just feel sorry for Auntie. Chapter 608. Speaking of Xiang Kaiping, even Hu Jinyao could only remain silent. He wouldn't be merciful to Su Peijian, but he had to admit that what they had done was unfair to Xiang Kaiping. All right. If you really care about her, you can go and chat with her when you're free in the future. Su Qingsang didn't say anything. It seemed that this was the only way. As for Su Peijian, you don't have to worry about it. Even if Xiang Kaiping really begged him, he would not change his mind. People like Su Peijian needed to be taught a lesson. When he thought of what Su Peijian had done to Su Qingsang, he didn't want to forgive Su Peijian at all. Su Peijian was definitely going to jail this time. Because of Qi Shiwei's influence, the Keifu Corporation did not intend to mediate in private with Hui Yifan and Su Peijian's request. He insisted on suing Hui Yifan and Su Peijian. Since the evidence against Su Peijian and Hui Yifan was irrefutable, the public prosecutor's office decided to hold the trial on Saturday. At that time, there would be a verdict on Hui Yifan and Su Peijian. Until then, the two of them were still imprisoned and had no freedom. With Hu Jinyao's help, the public prosecution hired a very good lawyer. With him around, Hui Yifan and Su Peijian would not be able to easily escape from prison. Hu Jinyao, who could have helped Hui Yifan, didn't want to help Hui Yifan at all. Whether it was Hua Mingguang who came to plead for leniency, or old Master Hua who came to speak. Hu Jinyao did not respond, nor did he intend to respond. He was determined to send Hui Yifan to prison. Hua Mingguang was very dissatisfied with Hu Jinyao's attitude. Even old Master Hua had some complaints about Hu Jinyao. However, everyone knew that Hu Jinyao had made up his mind. He wouldn't change his mind. Moreover, it was too late even if Hu Jinyao wanted to minimize the impact of the matter. In the blink of an eye, there were only 2 days left before the trial. One day before he got off work, Hu Jinyao saw a figure in his office that was almost impossible to see. Hu Jinyao looked at Lu Tongjia who was in front of him. After the first 2 seconds he recovered his composure. However, he didn't relax too much. There was a hint of wariness in his expression, as he didn't quite understand why she had come looking for him. Lu Tongjia didn't miss the flash of wariness in Hu Jinyao's eyes. She felt a chill run down her spine. His son was in front of her, but he was looking at her with that kind of gaze. She had really failed. Jinyao. What's up? Hearing Lu Tongjia call his name so gently, Hu Jinyao was a little surprised. After a moment of surprise, the wariness in his eyes deepened. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Lu Tongjia's face. He didn't want to miss any expression on her face. Lu Tongjia noticed the change in Hu Jinyao's expression, which made her suddenly choke on what she was going to say. Jinyao, the day after tomorrow Yifan's case will be heard, right? Hu Jinyao relaxed a lot when he heard Hu Yifan's name. So that was how it was. He leaned back in his chair and raised his eyebrows. Mom, you're not here to plead for Hu Yifan, are you? The look on Lu Tongjia's face didn't look too good. In fact, she didn't come to see Hu Jinyao because of Hu Yifan. Hu Jinyao didn't remember, but she did. Tomorrow, the day before the court hearing, was actually Hu Jinyao's birthday. She wanted Hu Jinyao to come home and have dinner with her. In fact, old Master Hua had the same idea. However, old Master Hua was still angry. For old Master Hua, no matter what kind of ambition Hu Yifan had in the past or what he had done wrong, it was enough to just make a scene at home. But Hu Jinyao wanted to make it big. Now, everyone knew that Tianyu Group had a vice president who not only betrayed them but also stole other people's business secrets. Everyone knew that the Hua family had such a person. Even Hua Mingguang and Hua Mingliang were embarrassed, not to mention old Master Hua. Therefore, old Master Hua also knew that Hu Jinyao's birthday was coming, but he didn't say anything. He was still angry at Hu Jinyao. In the past, when Lu Tongjia was dissatisfied with Hu Jinyao, old Master Hua would still stand on Hu Jinyao's side. This time, old Master Hua didn't stand on Hu Jinyao's side. Lu Tongjia was a little upset. This was her son, but now he was almost deserted by everyone. She wanted to ease the relationship between Hua Jinyao and old Master Hua. That was why she wanted to find Hua Jinyao and ask him to come home. She didn't expect that Hua Jinyao would misunderstand as soon as she opened her mouth. I don't want to plead for him. Lu Tongjia knew that Hua Jinyao didn't like Hua Yifan. Hua Yifan and Hua Yang had indeed not done much in the past few years. However, she didn't think it was serious enough to put them in jail. I just don't think he really did anything to hurt you. Why do you have to bite on him like this? Hua Jinyao almost laughed when he heard this. He really didn't do anything to hurt me. He just made things difficult for me in the company. He tried his best to steal my credit and tried his best to oust me from the position of CEO. Lu Tongjia was speechless when she heard this. The atmosphere in the office dropped to a freezing point again. Hua Jinyao couldn't be bothered to argue with the Hua family on this issue. Speaking of which, his crime is not unjust at all. That proposal was mine to begin with. He didn't even ask and directly took it to his father and grandfather to claim credit. He used this opportunity to re-enter the Tianyu group. Now you're all pleading for him one by one. Why don't you think about how righteous he was when he stole someone else's plan? Lu Tongjia looked at Hua Jinyao and wanted to say that she didn't really care about Hua Yifan's ending. However, Hua Jinyao didn't give her a chance. Mom, if you're okay, I have to continue working. This was a silent order for her to leave. Lu Tongjia's expression changed a few times. She was in no hurry to stand up and sat still. Hua Jinyao ignored her. He had already made up his mind that no matter who pleaded for him, he would definitely make Hua Yifan pay. Seriously speaking, he was a little innocent. Su Peijian was the one who gave him the plan and he just took it and used it. However, this was Hua Yifan's biggest mistake. How dare he take something that didn't even ask about its origin and present it as a treasure? Stupid. Hua Jinyao signed the documents in his hand. He still had other work to do. Recently he had a big merger to go through. He was so busy that he didn't have time to wonder why Lu Tongjia was sitting there. Lu Tongjia felt like she was sitting on pins and needles. She looked at Hua Jinyao. This was the first time she had seen Hua Jinyao deal with work. She remembered that Hua Jinyao was this serious when he was in school. Although he wasn't like Hua Jinkai, who had been responsible for the family since he was a child, he still had expectations of himself. As a descendant of the Hua family, he was very careful to protect the Hua family's reputation. She remembered that his grades had never dropped out of the top 3 in his grade. He often even took first place. She also remembered that once he was addicted to a video game and didn't pay much attention to his studies. At that time she didn't blame him. After all, he always knew what he wanted. Sure enough, after a few days he lost interest after passing all the checkpoints. She seemed to have seen him play games after that, but she rarely saw him addicted to them. Hua Jinyao would never care about his surroundings when he was immersed in work. When he finished reading the plan in his hand and wrote down his opinions, he found that Lu Tongjia was still sitting there. Hua Jinyao's lips curved into a mocking smile and he put down the pen. Mom, is there anything else? Lu Tongjia came back to her senses because of Hua Jinyao's words. She realized that she had been sitting there for nearly an hour. She gripped the strap of her bag tightly and looked at Hua Jinyao. Tomorrow is your birthday. Your grandfather wants you to go home for dinner. His birthday? Hua Jinyao seemed to have just remembered it. He narrowed his eyes and thought of something. It's my birthday? Is it because it's my birthday and Grandpa wants me to go home? Or is it because he wants to try again tomorrow to make me change my mind and let Hua Yifan go? Hua Jinyao. Lu Tongjia finally felt a little angry. What do you think your family is? It's your birthday. Grandpa cares about you and wants you to go home for dinner. What's wrong with that? It's nothing. I just want to confirm with you. After all, it seems that you don't want to see me now. I haven't celebrated my birthday for so many years anyway. It's the same this year, but it's fine. Speaking of which, Lu Tongjia hadn't been very concerned about him since that incident when he was 12. In the past 10 years she hadn't specially celebrated his birthday. Every year on his birthday, his grandfather would ask Auntie Wang to cook a bowl of longevity noodles for him. As for Hua Mingguang and Lu Tongjia, in their hearts, they didn't even think about when it was his birthday. Instead, his childhood friends would get together with him every year to celebrate his birthday. Lu Tongjia felt as if her heart had been gently stabbed by something because of his words. After so many years she admitted that she had neglected Hua Jinyao. She had always thought that Hua Jinyao didn't care. Because of Lu Tongjia's expression, Hua Jinyao was more and more certain that they wanted him to go home just to make him change his mind and save Hua Yifan. His expression didn't look good. At that moment the internal line rang. President Hua, you have a meeting with President and of the In Group in 5 minutes. President and is already here. Ask him to wait in the conference room. I'll be there right away. Hua Jinyao hung up the internal line and stood up. Looking at Lu Tongjia, who was still sitting there, his expression was very calm. Please tell Grandpa that I have a lot of things to do recently and I'm very busy. We'll see how it goes tomorrow. If I don't have time, I won't go back. He put aside the documents on the table, picked up one of them and walked out. When he passed by Lu Tongjia, he said in a very low voice, "If you don't really want to celebrate my birthday, don't pretend to be like that. You don't want to see me, so why force yourself? I'm tired for you." Ever since Lu Tongjia drugged Zhang Yichen, Hua Jinyao was no longer willing to maintain a superficial peace with Lu Tongjia. She clearly didn't like him and she clearly hated him, but she still came to see him for another person. This made Hua Jinyao even more disgusted. Perhaps Lu Tongjia preferred Hua Yifan to be her son. Who knew? Lu Tongjia was hurt by Hua Jinyao. She covered her heart, unable to recover from the bursts of heartache for a long time. She suddenly thought of what Hua Jinyao said that night. He said, "After so many years, do you wish that I was the one who died back then?" He also said, "Actually, I'm not lying to you, I also wish that I was the one who died back then." That night, she dreamed of Hua Jinyao constantly questioning her with these two sentences. Now it was even more so. Again and again, it kept echoing in her mind. Lu Tongjia's body softened in the chair, and her whole heart ached as if it had been pierced by a needle. When Hua Jinyao entered the house, he smelled the aroma of food in the air. Hearing him come in, Su Qingsang poked her head out of the kitchen and said, "You're back? Wash your hands and dinner will be ready soon." Hua Jinyao put down the car key, took off his shoes and entered the house. He found that it was Su Qingsang who was cooking. "Why are you cooking? Where's Auntie Yu?" "I gave Auntie Yu the day off." Su Qingsang scooped up the dishes and put them on the cooking table. "Okay, go wash your hands and get ready for dinner." "Why did you suddenly think of cooking?" Hua Jinyao wrapped his arms around her waist and found that a thin layer of sweat had appeared on her forehead. When Hua Jinyao went out this morning, Su Qingsang told him to go home early. He knew what day it was, but he pretended not to know. "What do you think?" Su Qingsang kept him in suspense. She patted his arm and told him to let go. She gestured for him to wash his hands quickly. She picked up the dish and walked out. Hua Jinyao washed his hands and came out. He glanced at the table and saw 6 dishes and a soup in the middle. It was a little too much for the two of them. Steamed base, braised pork ribs, beer duck, crab meat. Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang with admiration in his eyes. "Not bad. It looks very good." Su Qingsang filled a bowl of soup for Hua Jinyao and put it in front of him. "Wrong. Not only does it look good, but it also tastes quite good." Hua Jinyao looked at the soup in his hand. "Is this caterpillar fungus?" "Yes." Su Qingsang nodded. "It's authentic caterpillar fungus. I asked Auntie Yu to buy a free-range chicken. It was stewed in the afternoon. Try it." Hua Jinyao took a sip and nodded. "Yes, it's very good. Not bad, right? I only put 2 pieces of ginger to enhance the taste. I didn't put any MSG." Su Qingsang looked at Hua Jinyao as if she was asking for credit. "How is it? My cooking is good, right?" "Yes. Not bad. But it's just the two of us. Isn't it a waste to have so many dishes?" "It's not a waste. Today is a special day." Su Qingsang smiled. Hua Jinyao finished the soup and looked at her with a smile. "What day is special? What do you think?" Su Qingsang smiled and filled a bowl of soup for herself. Seeing that Hua Jinyao's bowl was empty, she took it and filled it for him. "I'll do it myself." "No need. You're the oldest today. So I'll do it." Su Qingsang smiled and placed the bowl in front of him. "Birthday boy. Happy birthday." Hua Jinyao smiled. "I thought you didn't know." "I didn't know before." Su Qingsang blinked. Speaking of which, they had just gotten married on Hua Jinyao's birthday last year. At that time, Su Qingsang only wanted to find a man to spend the rest of her life with, so she didn't care about Hua Jinyao's birthday or their wedding anniversary at all. She didn't expect that one day she would have such deep feelings for Hua Jinyao. With feelings, she would put her heart into it. She would use her heart to understand everything about this man, whether it was his preferences or his mood. When the two of them came back from Rong City that day, Su Qingsang saw Hua Jinyao's birthday and remembered it immediately. Today she got off work more than an hour early just to prepare these dishes. But things are different now. I almost died on our wedding anniversary and didn't have a good time to celebrate it. On the one hand we can celebrate our first wedding anniversary and on the other hand we can celebrate your birthday. After listening to her, Hu Jingyao suddenly leaned over and kissed the corner of her lips. Thank you, honey. Su Qingsang smiled. Just as she was about to speak, the doorbell rang. She was stunned for a moment, not quite understanding who would come at this time. She glanced at Hu Jingyao and opened the door first. Su Qingsang was stunned by the person standing outside the door. She was stunned for a few seconds before she remembered to call someone. Auntie? Why was she here? Lu Tongjia stood at the door holding a big box in her hand. It looked like a birthday cake or something. She seemed a little uncomfortable. When she saw that the person who opened the door was Su Qingsang, the uneasiness on her face became more obvious. Is Hu Jingyao here? Yes. Su Qingsang glanced at the cake box in Lu Tongjia's hand and thought to herself that it couldn't be what she thought. She took a step back and looked in the direction of the dining room. Jingyao, your mother is here. Auntie, come in. As she spoke, Su Qingsang took a step back and gestured for Lu Tongjia to come in. Hu Jingyao came out at the same time as Lu Tongjia. The mother and son's eyes met. Hu Jingyao was stunned for a moment. Mom? Lu Tongjia stood there awkwardly. In fact, she asked Hu Jingyao to go home yesterday but he refused. She didn't sleep well last night and tossed and turned for a long time. Today she also struggled for a long time but finally she decided to come over. When she passed by the cake shop, she remembered that she hadn't celebrated Hu Jingyao's birthday since he was 12 years old. She began to feel guilty again. Without thinking she bought a cake and came over. After she arrived, she realized that her actions were a little abrupt. The three of them stood together in the living room like three pillars. Lu Tongjia should have wished Hu Jingyao a happy birthday. However, after so many years, she felt strange that she hadn't celebrated his birthday for him. Hu Jingyao saw the box in her hand. He frowned slightly and stood there without saying anything. Jingyao? Su Qingsang looked at Hu Jingyao and then at Lu Tongjia. After finding that neither of them wanted to say anything, she could only break the silence. Any, have you eaten? No. Lu Tongjia responded to Su Qingsang with a rare gentle attitude. She hadn't eaten. She had wanted to go back to the old house after delivering the cake. Su Qingsang was a little flattered by his attitude. Since you haven't eaten, let's eat together. Lu Tongjia was stunned by Su Qingsang's words. It seemed that she didn't expect such a suggestion. I'm the one who made the food. If you don't mind, let's eat together. Okay. Lu Tongjia followed Su Qingsang into the dining room. When Su Qingsang passed by Hu Jingyao, she glanced at him and signaled him to follow her. Hu Jingyao didn't move. In the end, he followed the two of them into the dining room. There was no one else in the room. Lu Tongjia glanced at the table. They were all very home-cooked dishes. She couldn't help but look at Hu Jingyao again. Did he usually eat like this? Andy, you can put this down first. Su Qingsang pointed at the box in Lu Tongjia's hand. The dining table was very big and there was room for it. Lu Tongjia came to her senses and felt uncomfortable again. She put down the cake box. Su Qingsang went inside and brought out a set of bowls and chopsticks for her. She served Lu Tongjia a bowl of soup first. Andy, have a bowl of soup first. It's good for your stomach. Thank you. Su Qingsang was shocked by his words of gratitude. Who was Lu Tongjia? In Su Qingsang's impression, she had always been high and mighty. Now she was saying thank you to her? Su Qingsang was so shocked that she almost fell to the ground. She couldn't help but look at Hu Jingyao. Hu Jingyao was very calm. He held the bowl of rice and ate it by himself. Su Qingsang couldn't figure out what Lu Tongjia was thinking. After sitting down, she couldn't help but kick Hu Jingyao. When Hu Jingyao raised his head, she silently gave him a look and asked him what Lu Tongjia meant. Hu Jingyao also gave Su Qingsang a look, indicating that she didn't need to care about Lu Tongjia. How could she not care? No matter what, she was still her mother-in-law, wasn't she? She came over to celebrate your birthday with good intentions. Were you going to give her a cold face? How did you know that the inspector was doing it out of good intentions? Maybe he had ulterior motives? She was your mother. Was she? She was my mother and she was also someone else's aunt. Su Qingsang gave up making eye contact with Hu Jingyao. She found that Lu Tongjia had been looking at them and smiled awkwardly. Auntie, do you want me to get you some rice? No. Lu Tongjia shook her head. I can do it myself. After she refused, the atmosphere became awkward again. Su Qingsang ate quietly and so did Hu Jingyao. Lu Tongjia was a little uncomfortable, but she forced herself to ignore it. After tasting the dishes on the table, she glanced at Su Qingsang and asked, Did you make all these dishes? Yes. Su Qingsang nodded. She felt a little flattered by Lu Tongjia's words. I'm not good at cooking. I'm sorry, Auntie. Before Lu Tongjia said anything, Hua Jinyao spoke first. He had already finished one bowl of rice and was about to add a second bowl. Because of Lu Tongjia's question, he glanced at her. If you don't like it, you can go back to the Hua family and ask Aunt Wang and Aunt Zhou to cook for you. You don't have to find fault with it. I didn't cook for you anyway. His words were so rude that Su Qingsang couldn't help but want to kick Hua Jinyao. That's the truth. Hua Jinyao didn't think he was wrong. Lu Tongjia came uninvited. He didn't invite her. Chapter 609. The atmosphere was so awkward that Su Qingsang couldn't help but kick Hua Jinyao under the table. She turned to look at Lu Tongjia, her voice much gentler than Hua Jinyao's. Auntie, ignore him. My cooking is just average. Just make do with it for today. She naturally knew how good Auntie Zhou and Auntie Wang's cooking was. She really couldn't compare with them. Lu Tongjia looked at Su Qingsang and suddenly seemed to understand why her son liked her. She picked up the bowl and ate the rice in it. Her eyes were inexplicably dry. The moment she lowered her head to eat, Su Qingsang glared at Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao was still expressionless. He ate as fast as he could and stood up. I'm full. Eat slowly. You don't have to wash the dishes. Auntie, you will come to clean them tomorrow. I know. Go sit in the living room for a while. I have a gift for you later. Really? A smile finally appeared on Hua Jinyao's face. I thought my birthday present was this table full of dishes. This is one of the gifts. Su Qingsang had a faint smile on her face. Don't you like it? I like it very much. Hua Jinyao leaned over and kissed Su Qingsang's cheek. I like my wife's cooking no matter what. He only knew how to coax her. Su Qingsang glared at him. She turned around and found that Lu Tongjia had been looking at them. She suddenly blushed. Hua Jinyao also noticed Lu Tongjia's gaze, but to him, it was as if he didn't see it. After Hua Jinyao left, Lu Tongjia couldn't eat any more. She still held the bowl in her hand and sat there, but her whole body was very stiff. Su Qingsang looked at her and felt a little sorry for her. Hua Jinyao didn't say it, but his attitude showed everything. He might have thought that Lu Tongjia came to plead for Hua Yifan. But Su Qingsang instinctively believed that was not the case. No matter why Lu Tongjia decided to change her attitude towards Hua Jinyao, Su Qingsang was happy to see it happen. After dinner, Su Qingsang asked Lu Tongjia to go out and sit for a while she cleaned up the dishes. Lu Tongjia wanted to say that she was here to help, but she had never done such things before. She could only stand there and watch Su Qingsang clean up the dishes. Auntie, you should go out and rest. Hua Jinyao was also outside. If Lu Tongjia was really there to improve their relationship, this would be a good time to talk to her. Lu Tongjia roughly understood what she meant. She got up and walked outside. In the living room, Hua Jinyao was playing games on Su Qingsang's phone. The upgraded version of Candy Crush. When Su Qingsang was free, she would play a game or two to relax. This round was especially difficult. She couldn't pass it even after a long time. It had been stuck there for days. Hua Jinyao was in a good mood today, so he casually checked for her. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Lu Tongjia coming out. Without saying a word, he started the next round. Lu Tongjia couldn't sit still anymore. She looked at Hua Jinyao and couldn't believe that he was playing games while she was sitting there. This was a very disrespectful way of doing things. Jinyao. Where did his etiquette go? Who allowed him to do this in front of his elders? If you want me to stop prosecuting Hua Yifan, you don't have to say anything. Hua Jinyao didn't even raise his head. He didn't even look at Lu Tongjia. Lu Tongjia felt like she was sitting on pins and needles. She looked at Hua Jinyao and was hurt by his words again. She suddenly understood how Hua Jinyao felt before. Was this how he felt every time she targeted Hua Jinyao? There was another moment of silence. Hua Jinyao passed 2 rounds in a row. Seeing that Lu Tongjia was still there, he put his phone aside. Did Grandpa or Dad ask you to come? Or did Uncle and Auntie send you here? Hua Jinyao. What kind of attitude was this? Lu Tongjia almost couldn't help but want to question him. It's been hard on you. You finally remembered that it's your son's birthday for the sake of your nephew. Lu Tongjia was immediately discouraged. Her lips moved, wanting to explain that she didn't remember his birthday because of Hua Yifan. She wanted to explain that she really wanted to celebrate his birthday with him this time. However, looking at Hua Jinyao's mocking expression, she suddenly couldn't say it. If you have nothing else to say, go back. I won't change my mind. Today was his birthday. He only wanted to be with someone he liked, who also liked him, and who was willing to celebrate his birthday sincerely. As for people like Lu Tongjia who had ulterior motives, forget it. Lu Tongjia sat there motionlessly. She suddenly fell into great self-doubt. Her relationship with Hu Jinyao would probably never be repaired, would it? Her indifference for more than 10 years had finally created an irreparable estrangement between her and Hu Jinyao. Lu Tongjia sat still. Hu Jinyao thought that she didn't want to give up. Although he didn't care anymore. He was more or less uncomfortable. In the eyes of Lu Tongjia and Hu Mingguang, his son was not even as good as Hu Yifan's nephews. He was not even as good as Wei Sihai and Wei Siming from his aunt's family. He had clearly seen through it, but Hu Jinyao didn't want to tolerate such a biased attitude anymore. He was about to get up to see Su Qingsang. However, Su Qingsang had already cleaned up the kitchen. She was still holding the cake that Lu Tongjia had just bought. Almost as soon as she came out, she felt that the environment in the living room was not right. She glanced at Hu Jinyao, but Hu Jinyao didn't respond. I'm going to take a shower. Wait a minute. I haven't eaten yet. I just ate. I can't eat anymore. Hu Jinyao was quite rude. Su Qingsang actually couldn't eat anymore. However, this cake was brought by Lu Tongjia. No matter what, it was a gift from her. Then we'll eat later. Let's sit for a while? Hu Jinyao didn't sit down as she wanted. I'm going to take a shower. Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang saw that he really didn't care about anything and walked into the room. She quickly put down the cake, smiled at Lu Tongjia awkwardly, and quickly followed behind Hu Jinyao. Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang entered the room and stood in front of Hu Jinyao. What are you doing? What are you doing? Hu Jinyao asked. Your mother is here to celebrate your birthday. Really? I don't think so. I think so. She has a purpose. Can't you see it? I can't see it. It wasn't that she didn't see Lu Tongjia's expression at the dining table just now. If she really had another purpose, she wouldn't have that kind of expression. That's your illusion. Hu Jinyao didn't want to quarrel with Su Qingsang because of other people. Stop. I thought you didn't like her? What are you doing now? Are you speaking up for her? I'm not speaking up for her. I just think that maybe she really came to celebrate your birthday. Hu Jinyao raised his eyebrows and looked disapproving. Even if she really came to celebrate my birthday. So what? Su Qingsang felt that she couldn't communicate with him like this. I'm not thinking about anything. I just think that you obviously want to restore your relationship with your parents. Don't be against each other every time. Why can't you give her and yourself a chance? No matter how careless Hu Jinyao said it, she would never forget it. That time when he was sick, he muttered, Mom. She believed that deep down he wanted to improve his relationship with Lu Tongjia. Since that was the case, why couldn't he try to trust Lu Tongjia for once? Hu Jinyao took a step back because of Su Qingsang's words. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Su Qingsang. Qingsang, let me tell you. I'm not you. You can forgive Su Qinghui, but that doesn't mean that I have to forgive my mother. Su Qingsang was speechless. In fact, the last time Su Qinghui went to the Li family and blamed her for nothing, she still couldn't get over it. Don't do to others what you don't want others to do to you. She really didn't have the right to ask Hu Jinyao to forgive Lu Tongjia. I gave her a chance. More than once. Because of the guilt and self-blame in his heart, he had made concessions again and again for so many years. It was the same no matter what it was. However, his concession didn't wake Lu Tongjia up. She was still thinking about Hu Yifan. She didn't really want to celebrate his birthday. In that case, why put on an act? He didn't care how Lu Tongjia treated him. But Lu Tongjia shouldn't have hurt Su Qingsang. He couldn't tolerate it. Because of this, he had a deep grudge against Lu Tongjia and had no intention of improving his relationship with Lu Tongjia. I'm going to take a shower. Su Qingsang stood there and watched Hu Jinyao go into the bathroom. Her lips moved, but in the end she walked out helplessly. Lu Tongjia was still sitting there. She looked a little dazed and not in the right state of mind. She seemed to be in a trance. Su Qingsang couldn't bear to see her like this. If Lu Tongjia really came for Hu Yifan, she wouldn't have such a look on her face. But Hu Jinyao wouldn't believe that. Auntie? She sat down opposite Lu Tongjia and said, Jinyao went to take a shower. Let's wait for him to finish his bath before we eat the cake. Lu Tongjia finally came to her senses. She glanced at Su Qingsang and shook her head gently. Forget it. I'm going back. Auntie? Su Qingsang cleared her throat and said, Aren't you going to wait for Jinyao? He takes a shower very quickly. There's no need. Lu Tongjiao wasn't a blind person. Hu Jingyao didn't want to see her. If she stayed, Hu Jingyao wouldn't be nice to her. Auntie? It was the first time Su Qingsang had seen Lu Tongjiao like this. In the past she had always been elegant and noble, even a little arrogant. Lu Tongjiao didn't say anything. She glanced at Su Qingsang and finally left. Before she left, her eyes fell on the cake and she was lost in thought for a moment. Speaking of which, she hadn't celebrated a birthday with Hu Jingyao for more than 10 years, and they hadn't had cake together. Lu Tongjiao left, and Su Qingsang's mood was inexplicably tight. In fact, what Lu Tongjiao did was indeed infuriating. But seeing her like this, Su Qingsang couldn't feel happy. She felt sorry for Lu Tongjiao, probably because of the huge contrast between her and Lu Tongjiao. When she returned to the room, Hu Jingyao had already taken a shower. Auntie left. Okay. Hu Jingyao didn't care. Su Qingsang stood behind him and looked at his hair, which was still dripping with water. Hu Jingyao, I can see that Auntie really wants to celebrate your birthday with you. Really? Hu Jingyao picked up a towel and casually wiped his hair. So what? He had already given up on Lu Tongjiao. He didn't have any hope for her. If she really came to celebrate his birthday with him, why would she leave so easily? To put it bluntly, Su Qingsang was too naive and trusting. If you don't mention her, I'll feel happier today. Su Qingsang was silent. She watched Hu Jingyao dry his hair, then walked to her and stood still. Okay, my dear wife. Now I'm going to enjoy my birthday present. Birthday present? You don't think that you can satisfy me just by cooking a table of dishes for me, do you? What else? Of course you're going to wrap yourself up and give it to me. As Hu Jingyao spoke, he picked Su Qingsang up. Su Qingsang instinctively put her arms around his neck. Wait a minute. I have a present for you. There's no hurry to be polite. I want to eat you more now. Hu Jingyao put Su Qingsang's body on the bed. She suddenly blocked his lips when he was about to kiss her. Wife. Today was his birthday. Didn't she want to satisfy him? I think I just left. He came back to Lin City so he should know something. And then? In other words, I'm not pregnant. Isn't that good? Give me another chance. Su Qingsang put her arms around his neck. Can we do it again? Hu Jingyao stopped for a moment. His expression was half helpless and half conflicted. Do you want a child that much? Yes. You're an obstetrician and gynecologist. You should know that pregnancy is very hard. Yes. You should also know that giving birth will be very painful. It's said that it's level 10 pain. I know. Whether it's a cesarean section or a natural birth, the woman is the one who suffers. That's right. Even so, you still want a child? Yes. Su Qingsang put her arms around his neck and looked at him intently. I just want a child. Will you give it to me? Hu Jingyao supported his body with one hand and looked at Su Qingsang, who was so stubborn. He felt a little helpless. Today is my birthday. I'm willing to try again. Okay. Su Qingsang was confident. If there was one, there would be two, and if there was two, there would be three. Sooner or later, she would make Hu Jingyao completely change his mind and agree to have a child. The next day was the day of the trial. When Hu Jingyao got up, Su Qingsang was still sleeping. She was exhausted yesterday. In order to get pregnant, she had worked hard. Hu Jingyao looked at her sleeping face and couldn't help but laugh. He leaned over and kissed Su Qingsang on the forehead. Su Qingsang slept soundly and wasn't affected by him at all. Hu Jingyao got up and tidied himself up as quickly as possible. Looking at himself in the mirror in his suit, the corners of his lips curled up. Hu Yifan, Su Peijian, this time neither of them would be able to escape. When he left, Hu Jingyao saw the cake that was still on the coffee table. His footsteps stopped for a moment. He was about to leave, but he opened the cake box again. It was a beautiful cake with a small house on it. There was a small card on the house. Happy birthday was written on it. Hu Jingyao stared at the 4 words for a long time. He rubbed his forehead and finally covered the cake again. When he went out, he took it out and threw it into the trash can in the corridor. It wasn't a sincere blessing, so he didn't want it. When Hu Jingyao arrived at the courthouse, almost all the Hu family members were there. Old Master Hua, Hu Mingguang, Lu Tongjia, Hu Mingliang, Nian Chuanya, Hu Mingmei, Wei Nantian, and their respective children were all there. Hu Jingyao was the last one to arrive. Yang Wenchang and Zhang Yang were behind him. When they saw him come in, the other members of the Hua family didn't look happy. Especially Hu Mingliang and Yan Chuanya. They looked at Hu Jingyao with daggers in their eyes. Hu Jingyao didn't care at all. He did it on purpose. The trial wasn't public. All the people who could attend the trial were related to the case. Not long after Hu Jingyao sat down, Xiang Kaiping also came. Seeing Xiang Kaiping, Hu Jingyao restrained his expression. He nodded slightly at her as a greeting. Xiang Kaiping looked at him and her lips moved, but she didn't say anything. She sat down in the back seat. Hu Jingyao only glanced in that direction and quickly looked away. The trial soon began. When Hu Yifan was brought out, his expression was very ugly, and he looked very haggard. A genius like him had always been high and mighty. One day he was suddenly imprisoned. Naturally he couldn't bear it. Su Peijian was as haggard and ugly as he was. Su Peijian had never been bullied like this since she was a child. There were faint dark shadows under her eyes, and her whole person exuded a gloomy aura. She was completely different from the arrogant and domineering person she had when they first met. Xiang Kaiping looked at Su Peijian and felt as if her heart was being squeezed by someone. After all, she was her own flesh and blood. No matter how wrong and unreasonable Su Peijian had been before, she was still her own child. She subconsciously looked in Hu Jinyao's direction, but found that he wasn't paying attention to her at all. Xiang Caiping's face darkened again. The trial continued. First, the plaintiff's lawyer filed a complaint, then the defendant's lawyer. In order to get Hu Yifan off the hook, the Hua family found him a lawyer who was quite famous in the industry. The lawyers on both sides went back and forth, each presenting their evidence. The atmosphere was very intense. Everyone was very nervous. Only Hu Jingyao was very calm. He didn't want to come at first. He just wanted to witness Hu Yifan's final downfall. An hour and a half later, after a round of rest, the judge finally announced the final result. Hu Yifan is found guilty of stealing trade secrets and is sentenced to a fine of 5 million yuan. 6 years and 6 months in prison. Su Peijian is found guilty of stealing trade secrets and is sentenced to a fine of 3 million yuan. 5 years in prison. I'm not convinced. I want to appeal. I want to appeal, I want to appeal. Hu Yifan shouted, but his clamor was immediately stopped by the court police. He had no choice but to stare in Hu Jinyao's direction when he was about to be escorted away. Hu Jinyao, I will definitely appeal to the end. Just you wait. Just you wait. Hu Jinyao had already stood up and was about to leave. Because of Hu Yifan's words, he stopped and looked at him. As long as you're happy. Cousin, perform well. I'm still waiting for you to come out soon. Hu Jinyao, you bastard. You set me up. You set all of this up. You bastard. To Hu Yifan, going to prison for 6.5 years was even more painful than killing him. He completely lost his usual demeanor and began to shout. Hu Jinyao ignored him. When he left the door, he couldn't hear Hu Yifan's shouts at all. President Hua? Yang Wenchang approached him before he got into the car and said softly, I saw old Master Hu just now. He didn't look very good. Don't you think so? Hu Jinyao also saw that when old Master Hu heard the verdict, he covered his heart and looked like he was about to collapse. He closed his eyes. Grandpa is still angry. He won't want to see me. With Dad and the others around, nothing should happen to Grandpa. Let's go back to the company first. Something like Hu Yifan's incident actually had a certain impact on Chanyu Group. Even though today's verdict wasn't public, Hu Yifan had been too high profile previously. The news of the new plan research had spread to everyone. Now many people were probably waiting to see Chanyu Group make a fool of itself. And Hu Jinyao would never give those people such a chance. After getting into the car, he was about to let Yang Wenchang drive when the door was suddenly opened. Xiang Kaiping stood by the door and looked at Hu Jinyao. Her eyes were full of conflict and her expression was very complicated. Jinyao? Auntie. Xiang Kaiping looked at his nonchalant expression and couldn't bring herself to say the words. However, she thought of her daughter who was sentenced to 5 years in prison. She had to speak again. Jinyao. I know Peijian did something wrong, but she's still young. If she offended you in any way, tell me and I'll teach her a lesson. I also know that she caused your company to suffer losses. How about this? I'll compensate you for your company's losses. Is that okay? Although she didn't have much money on her now, she could sell all the supermarkets under her name. That way she would have money to give to Hu Jinyao. Andy, don't be like this. Su Peijian is Su Peijian and you are you. You don't have to take responsibility for her actions. How is that possible? She's my daughter. At this point Xiang Kaiping really cried out loud. I gave birth to her and then abandoned her. It's all my fault. That's why she became like this. If I had raised her by my side since she was young, if I had taken good care of her and raised her, I believe she wouldn't be like this now. She sniffed, really sad and blaming herself. It's all my fault. I'm willing to take responsibility for her as long as you don't let her go to prison. She's only 26 years old this year. If she goes to prison for a few years, won't she be ruined? Hua Jingyao sat in the car and didn't move. Xiang Kaiping didn't cry, but this was even more unbearable than crying out loud. Chapter 610. Xiang Kaiping had nowhere else to go. This was the only and best solution she could think of at the moment. Hua Jingyao sat in the car seat with his hands folded in front of him. He leaned over, took out a bottle of juice from the small refrigerator in the car, and handed it to Xiang Kaiping. Auntie, drink some juice first and calm down. Xiang Kaiping didn't take the bottle of juice. She couldn't calm down at all. Jingyao. Jingyao, I'm begging you, okay? Really? I swear. I will definitely take her and go far away. Okay. I'm sorry, Auntie. Hua Jinyao's voice was slightly cold. He looked at Xiang Kaiping with a gentle expression, but his eyes were unusually firm. I can't agree to your request. Jingyao. Xiang Kaiping stood there in a daze. She stared at him blankly. Su Peijian did something to hurt Qingsang. You know that Qingsang is my bottom line. I won't allow anyone to hurt her. He looked at Xiang Kaiping, who was already stunned, and put the bottle of juice in her hand. Auntie. Su Peijian needs to be taught a good lesson and reflect on herself. I won't agree to your request. Also, even after 5 years, if she comes back and still wants to go against Qingsang, then I won't be polite at all. Xiang Kaiping stood there holding the bottle of juice in her hand. Her face was very pale and she looked very depressed. Hua Jingyao glanced at her and sighed in his heart. Auntie, other than this matter, if you need any help, you can come to me or Qingsang. Xiang Kaiping didn't seem to hear him. If Hua Jingyao refused to help, Su Peijian would definitely go to jail. This was a huge blow to her. Hua Jingyao didn't say much and gestured for Yang Wenchang to drive. They were about to reach the company when Hua Jinyao's phone rang. It was a call from Lu Tongjia. Hua Jingyao looked at the number but still picked it up. After hearing the voice coming from the other end, his expression suddenly became much more serious. Go to the hospital. Old Master Hua was too emotional just now. After Hua Jingyao left, he really fainted. At that moment, the rest of the Hua family had already sent Old Master Hua to the hospital. Hua Jingyao rushed to the hospital. The doctors were still trying to save Old Master Hua. All the members of the Hua family were standing in the corridor. Just now, the group of people in the court couldn't do anything to Hua Jingyao. Now that he was here, they all stared at him with dissatisfaction. Seeing him coming, Hua Mingguang, who was standing outside, strode over. He raised his hand at Hua Jingyao and wanted to slap him. Hua Jingyao raised his hand and stopped Hua Mingguang. Hua Mingguang missed. His face was a little pale and he glared at Hua Jingyao. Now that your wings have hardened, you can do whatever you want, right? You don't need to care about your family anymore, do you? Hua Jingyao did not speak. His hand was still holding Hua Mingguang's hand. Hua Mingguang glared at him as if he wanted to burn a hole in his face. Your grandfather is so angry that he fainted. He's still being resuscitated. He didn't know what was going on. Are you satisfied now that things have come to this? After all, they were in the hospital. Hua Mingguang's voice was very soft and a little suppressed. Hua Jingyao frowned. He let go of his hand with some force, and Hua Mingguang's hand was thrown away by him. Hua Mingguang's expression was ugly, but Hua Jingyao was not afraid at all. He took a step forward. He was tall, and he was half a head taller than Hua Mingguang. He narrowed his eyes slightly, and at that moment, his aura was fully released. Even Hua Mingguang could only retract his hand in embarrassment. Dad, you seem to have made a mistake. I'm not the one who did the wrong thing from the beginning to the end. It's Hua Yifan. If he didn't betray me first, if he didn't steal my plan first, then he wouldn't have to face all of this today. Then he won't have to face all of this today and Grandpa will naturally be fine. If I was the one who betrayed you today and the one who stole the plan was me, I believe that Hua Yifan won't be much soft-hearted than me. I'm afraid that his methods will be even more ruthless. Instead of looking for someone else's reason, you're blaming me? Isn't that ridiculous? Hua Jinyao's voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to be heard by every member of the Hua family in the corridor. Especially when he glanced at Hua Mingliang's family, his gaze was very sharp. He didn't need to say anything more, but everyone could understand what he meant. Nian Chunya moved her toes and was about to walk in Hua Jinyao's direction. However, Lu Tongjia seemed to coincidentally block in front of her at this moment. Nian Chunya was of low birth. Whether it was in terms of education or knowledge, she couldn't compare to Lu Tongjia. In front of her, she inexplicably lost some of her imposing manner. Lu Tongjia's gaze swept across the faces of the others present indifferently. As Hua Mingguang's wife and the current madam of the Hua family, the others almost instantly understood what she meant from her attitude. Hua Jinyao noticed Lu Tongjia's movements. His furrowed brows didn't relax and he gave her a meaningful look. Hua Mingguang was very filial. Now that his father was hospitalized because of Hua Jinyao, he was full of anger. However, in the face of Hua Jinyao's repeated questioning, Hua Mingguang's anger just now was stuck in his chest, and he couldn't vent it no matter how hard he tried. "You?" Hua Jinyao ignored him and looked in the direction of the emergency room. Old Master Hua was still in the emergency room, and his feelings were very complicated. He didn't think he was wrong, but Old Master Hua had been the person who treated him the best in the entire Hua family since he was a child. He really didn't want anything to happen to Old Master Hua. Half an hour later, the doctor came out from inside and looked at the group of people surrounding the room. Everyone knew the status of the Hua family in Rong City. The leading doctor walked in front of the Hua family. Old Master Hua had a slight stroke. Fortunately, the rescue was done in time and he's fine now. However, Old Master Hua is old, and his various indicators are a little high. If possible, it's better not to stimulate him. The other Hua family members all looked at Hua Jinyao with obvious criticism in their eyes. Hua Jinyao acted as if he didn't see it. Old Master Hua entered the VIP ward. The others immediately followed, wanting to put on a good performance before Old Master Hua woke up. Only Hua Jinyao walked at the back. Lu Tongjia also walked at the back. She was a step slower than Hua Jinyao. Seeing that the ward was just around the corner, she suddenly called out to Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao stopped and looked at Lu Tongjia silently. "Jinyao, come here." As she spoke, she took the lead and walked to the end of the corridor. Hua Jinyao didn't move for a few seconds. After pausing for a while, he walked forward and followed behind Lu Tongjia. There was a window at the end of the corridor facing the lawn outside the hospital. The weather was good today. The sun shone on the lawn, and patients were moving around in groups of 2s and 3s, accompanied by their families. Lu Tongjia turned around and looked at Hua Jinyao. She had almost deliberately neglected the fact that her son had already grown so big. He was now 31 years old, from 12 years old. More than 10 years seemed like a blink of an eye, but it also seemed like a long time. She remembered her broken heart when she lost her beloved daughter and eldest son. She also remembered her anger when she blamed Hua Jinyao for everything because of the unquenchable hatred in her heart. Lu Tongjia's feelings were very complicated. She looked at Hua Jinyao blankly and didn't speak for a long time. Hua Jinyao stood there without moving. If it weren't for Lu Tongjia's action just now, he wouldn't have followed her. Seeing that she didn't speak, he frowned slightly. "Mom, what's the matter?" Lu Tongjia came back to her senses. Seeing Hua Jinyao's face, she felt sad again. However, she knew that she couldn't let him go in such a situation again. "Since your grandfather's life is not in danger, you don't have to worry about what happens next. You can do whatever you want." Hua Jinyao was stunned. For a moment he thought that there was something wrong with his ears. Lu Tongjia couldn't help but continue. Hua Yifan did some things wrong. He was the one who brought this upon himself. 6.5 years isn't too long. It's good to let him reflect on himself in there. These words really didn't sound like something Lu Tongjia would say. Hua Jinyao stood there and looked at her with a probing gaze, as if he wanted to know her real intentions. Lu Tongjia finished what she wanted to say, so it wasn't so difficult for her to say the next words. "Jinyao, from now on you can do whatever you want. I won't interfere in your affairs anymore." Lu Tongjia was rarely gentle. Hua Jinyao's expression didn't change. He just looked at Lu Tongjia. She felt uncomfortable under his gaze. Hua Jinyao was her son. However, she always felt a sense of guilt. "It's okay. Go see your grandfather." It was really difficult to apologize. She wanted to ease the relationship, but she didn't know where to start. Hua Jinyao looked at Lu Tongjia deeply. He had a rough idea of what she didn't say. He was a little surprised, but he wouldn't believe that Lu Tongjia had really changed. He would see as he walked. When Hua Jinyao entered the ward, the 3 siblings of the Hua family as well as the grandchildren of the 3rd generation were all waiting in the ward. Fortunately, it was a VIP ward. Otherwise, it would have been crowded with so many people. Seeing Hua Jinyao come in, Nian Chuanya looked a little upset. She wanted to say something but she held back. Not long after, Su Qingsang also came. She was in the clinic and immediately came after hearing that old Master Hua was in the hospital. After entering the door, she looked at Hua Jinyao with a little worry. She had heard about old Master Hua's condition from her colleagues. It was serious but not serious. All of this depended on the care and old Master Hua's own health. Hua Jinyao gave her a look. The two of them looked at each other and they both understood what he meant. A group of people stayed in the ward and no one wanted to leave first. Old Master Hua didn't stay in a coma for long. He woke up soon. He didn't respond to the chattering of the people in the ward. After looking around, he waved his hand. Get out. Old Master Hua's voice was a little hoarse. However, it was quite firm. Everyone looked at Hua Jinyao, especially Hua Yang and the others. Their eyes were full of schadenfreude. Hua Jinyao stood still. Su Qingsang looked at him with a little worry. Get out. Old Master Hua said again. Hua Jinyao's eyes were half closed. The thoughts in his eyes were hidden, so others couldn't see through him. He lifted his feet and was about to walk out when old Master Hua spoke again. All of you get out. Jinyao, stay. This time Hua Yang's face was a little sullen. The others were even more so. However, it was only for a moment. Based on the current situation, old Master Hua was definitely going to teach Hua Jinyao a lesson. Thinking of this, the others all filed out and left. Su Qingsang stood still. She wanted to stay, but she could only look at Hua Jinyao worriedly and leave. This was a VIP ward, so the soundproofing was very good. The group of people left the ward and couldn't hear the sound inside anymore. After coming out, Su Qingsang stood in front of Lu Tongjia. She found that there was some worry in Lu Tongjia's eyes. She was a little surprised, but when she thought of Lu Tongjia's action of giving Hua Jinyao a birthday cake yesterday, she felt that she could guess what Lu Tongjia was thinking. If Lu Tongjia really wanted to improve her relationship with Hua Jinyao, it would be really great. While she was still thinking about it, Hua Jinyao had already come out of the ward. As soon as he came out, the rest of the Hua family wanted to go into the ward. Grandpa said that he's tired and needs to rest. There are doctors and nurses here, so you can go back first. What makes you say that? Hua Jinyao, why is old master in the hospital because of you? What are you doing now? Nian Chunyao was angry. As soon as she finished speaking, Hua Mingmei also spoke. Yes. Jinyao, it's my father who is sleeping in there. What? Are you still thinking of using the emperor to order the nobles? Grandpa is really tired. He needs to rest. You can go. Hua Jinyao blocked the door of the ward. Hua Mingmei was furious. She turned to look at Hua Mingguang and said, Brother, look. Hua Mingguang glanced at Hua Jinyao and said, Your grandfather won't even let me in, will he? Get out of the way. I'll go in and have a look. Hua Jinyao glanced at him and moved a little to the side. Just go in alone. Brother, go in quickly and tell Dad that I want to go in to see him. Yes, me too. Hua Mingliang and Hua Mingmei rushed to speak. Hua Mingguang rarely showed some impatience. He glanced at them and went into the ward. However, Hua Mingguang didn't stay for long and soon came out. After coming out, he first glanced at Hua Jinyao with a somewhat complicated look in his eyes. You can all go. Dad said that he's tired. He needs to rest. Since Hua Mingguang said so, the others couldn't stay even if they wanted to. However, Hua Mingmei wasn't willing to give up. Humph, Dad was angry because of you. Hua Jinyao, you're really a good descendant of our Hua family. That's right. If it weren't for you, how could old Master Hua have encountered this? Hua Jinyao stood there and didn't seem to hear their criticism. However, Hua Mingguang's face was a little gloomy. Have you said enough? If you have, you can all leave. Let Dad rest. Since the boss had spoken, the others had no choice but to leave. Soon the corridor was empty. Su Qingsang glanced at Hua Jinyao. Is Grandpa really sleeping? Yes. Old Master Hua was old. After being tossed around all morning and almost suffering a stroke, he was indeed not in good spirits. Jinyao, don't worry. I've asked Dr. Huang. Grandpa will be fine. Dr. Huang was the doctor who had just diagnosed old Master Hua. Since he said that old Master Hua was fine, then he should be fine. Hua Jinyao glanced at her and reached out to hold her in his arms. His chin rested on the top of her head, but he didn't say anything. He thought about how old Master Hua was clearly in poor spirits just now, but he still insisted on finishing what he wanted to say. Jinyao, you've really grown up now. You have an idea. I was indeed very angry, but now that I think about it, I don't think I should be angry. He cared about the Hua family's reputation, but he forgot to consider the big picture. With Hua Yifun's personality, if he didn't teach him a lesson, he was afraid that he would cause more trouble in the future. You're capable now. After so many years, you've also gained experience. I was a little worried about you at first, but now that I think about it, It seems that there's nothing to worry about. Old Master Hua let out a long sigh. This time I didn't think it through. In the future, let Hu Yifan and the others do whatever they want to do. Jin Yao. Old Master Hua looked at Hu Jin Yao. He was the heir that he had trained. He would also be the future heir of the Hua family. I'll ask Lawyer Chen to come later. I've decided to make a will first. Grandpa, don't say that. Hu Jin Yao had thought that Old Master Hua had asked him to stay to criticize him. He had even prepared how to refute it. But now, Old Master Hua's words made him completely at a loss. You'll live to 100 years old. What will you make? I don't need it. I'm old. After what happened today, I've also accepted it. Children and grandchildren have their own blessings. I don't want to worry about it anymore. Grandpa, all right. Go out. I want to rest for a while. For Hu Jin Yao, he really didn't want to help Hu Yifan reduce his crime. He had even thought that this would result in a long-term confrontation with the Hua family. However, the current situation was beyond his expectations. First, Lu Tongjia had expressed her stance, and then Old Master Hua had expressed his stance. With their statements, even if Hua Mingguang and the others had any objections, there was nothing they could do. After all, the most powerful person in the Hua family now was Old Master Hua. With his support, even if others wanted to do anything, they would have to worry about Old Master Hua. There was no need to tell Su Qingsang all this. She only needed to know that he was fine. No matter what, the problem had been solved. No, it wasn't completely solved. Hu Jinyao's eyes were as sharp as ever when he thought of the two people who still wanted to appeal. As expected, Hu Yifan and Su Peijian filed another appeal the next day. The two of them appealed from the municipal court to the provincial court. Hu Jinyao knew that they wouldn't give up so easily, so he let them do as they pleased. In the end, the second trial upheld the original verdict. Hu Yifan and Su Peijian would still have to spend the next few years in prison. After the second trial ended, another half a month passed. Rong City was getting hotter and hotter. Hu Jinyao looked at Qi Shiwei, who had a big belly. After not seeing her for nearly a month, her belly seemed to have grown a little bigger. Not only was her belly bigger, but her face was also much paler. Thank you for this time. If it weren't for you, I don't think I would have made Hu Yifan pay so easily. He could have used other methods to send Hu Yifan to prison, but because of Qi Shiwei's help, this was the fastest and easiest way. Jinyao were classmates and good friends. You don't have to be so polite. I'm not being polite. I just think it's what I should do. As Hu Jinyao spoke, he looked at Qi Shiwei with concern. Why do I feel that your complexion is worse than last time? Did you go for a checkup? It's okay. Pregnant people are all like this. Qi Shiwei smiled, but her face was too pale. That smile looked rather weak. Really? Hu Jinyao didn't believe her. He thought of Su Qingsang, who always wanted a child. However, if Su Qingsang was like this when she was pregnant, he really didn't want Su Qingsang to get pregnant. Of course. Don't worry. I know my body. It's really fine. Although Qi Shiwei said that, Hu Jinyao planned to ask someone to come here to check on her next time if she refused to go out. Perhaps he could go back and tell Su Qingsang. Hu Jinyao left Qi Shiwei's villa and got into the car. Only then did he remember that he had bought a thank you gift for Qi Shiwei before he came. It was to thank her for her help this time. He got out of the car with the gift he had bought and planned to leave after giving it to Qi Shiwei. However, before he could reach the villa where Qi Shiwei lived, he saw a man walking towards Qi Shiwei's house. The man didn't seem to notice Hu Jinyao behind him. Hu Jinyao had just left and the door was ajar. The Andy who took care of Qi Shiwei had just gone out to buy groceries and hadn't returned yet. The door wasn't closed and the man walked in directly. Hu Jinyao watched as the man walked in on his own and followed behind him without thinking. I finally found you. The man's words made Hu Jinyao stop in his tracks. Soon he heard Qi Shiwei's voice. What are you doing here? Get lost. Qi Shiwei's voice sounded a notch higher than usual, as if she was very excited. Soon he heard the man's voice. You're still pregnant with my child. Why do you think I'm here? This child is mine. I don't want to see you. Get out. The child is yours? Ah, ridiculous. Without me, how could you have a child? The man's voice sounded arrogant and smug. Qi Shiwei's voice became more and more excited. I don't want to see you. Get lost. It's easy for you to tell me to get lost. Give birth to the child in your stomach and give it to me. I'll naturally leave. Dream on. I won't give the child to you. Before Hu Jinyao could leave because of this conversation, he heard Qi Shiwei cry out in a low voice. He couldn't care less about anything else and quickly rushed into the house. The man from earlier was standing less than 2 meters away from the door. Qi Shiwei was originally sitting, but now, her face was pale and she was holding her stomach with one hand. What kind of show are you putting on now? The man stood there motionlessly, his voice full of mockery. Hu Jinyao glared at him. At this moment he couldn't care less about dealing with him. He walked to Qi Shiwei in a few steps. Shiwei, are you okay? Aye. Qi Shiwei said a few words and her face turned even paler. Shiwei, how are you? Chapter 6:11. What? Qi Shiwei grabbed Hu Jinyao's arm tightly. Her face was already covered in sweat. I'm going to give birth. What should I do? I'm going to give birth. Hu Jinyao glanced at her. There was already blood flowing out from under her. He was shocked and quickly picked her up. Don't worry. I'll take you to the hospital now. Qi Shiwei's expression was very ugly. Her stomach hurt. She had no strength left and could only let Hu Jinyao carry her. Hu Jinyao carried her and was about to walk out, but the man stood in front of Hu Jinyao. Are you really going to give birth? The due date wasn't even up yet, and it was already a month ahead of schedule. Was this woman trying to use this opportunity to escape? Put her down. The man glared at Qi Shiwei. Don't even think about abducting my child. Don't even think about it. Qi Shiwei's face was pale, and her forehead was covered in sweat. She didn't even look at the man and reached out to grab the front of Hu Jinyao's clothes. Jinyao, let's go. I don't want to see him. Hu Jinyao ignored the man and was about to walk out. The man stood in front of them and reached out to block their way. You want to leave? Leave the child behind first. Crazy. How could this person still cause trouble at a time like this? Get out of the way. The man looked at Qi Shiwei. I won't let you. Put her down first. Lian Jin, get lost. I don't want to see you. Qi Shiwei was already exhausted, but when she heard the man's words she couldn't help but speak up. You don't want to see me. You want to see him, right? I was wondering why you were in such a hurry to return home. What? Are you back to see your old lover? Do you think I'll let you do as you wish? Don't even think about it. The man named Lian Jin stood in front of the two of them and glared at Qi Shiwei. Come with me. I'll take you to the hospital. I don't want your fake kindness. Qi Shiwei's voice was very weak, but she refused to back down. Who knows if you'll kill me halfway? Lian Jin's expression was rather ugly. Qi Shiwei no longer wanted to tangle with him. She grabbed Hu Jinyao tightly. Jinyao, let him go. I don't want to see him. She was about to give birth. Hu Jinyao looked at her and felt anxious. Without thinking he raised his foot and kicked Lian Jin. Lian Jin didn't expect Hu Jinyao to make a move. He dodged to the side. Hu Jinyao was afraid that he would chase after him again, so he kicked him again. Lian Jin failed to dodge this kick and was kicked by Hu Jinyao. His body fell backwards and hit the coffee table. He was in so much pain that he did not stand up for a moment. Hu Jinyao used this time to quickly run towards the door with Qi Shiwei in his arms. He was very worried and anxious. Lian Jin didn't want to let it go just like that. He quickly propped himself up and ran behind Hu Jinyao to grab his arm. Hu Jinyao hugged Qi Shiwei and almost fell to the ground. Annoyed, he turned around. What do you want? She's my wife. Put her down. Qi Shiwei was in so much pain that she almost couldn't speak. Her stomach was in so much pain that it felt like it was being pulled. Seeing this, Hu Jinyao knew that she couldn't afford to waste any more time. Get out of my way. Can't you see that she's about to give birth? She needs to be sent to the hospital. If I want to send her to the hospital, I will naturally send her. It's not up to an outsider like you to pretend. Lian Jin sneered. Or is it your child in her stomach? This man was full of nonsense and Hu Jinyao didn't want to put up with him. However, Qi Shiwei's situation was the most important. Are you going to let me or not? You won't let me be impolite anymore. I'd like to see how you plan to be impolite. After saying that, Lian Jin was about to snatch him away. Qi Shiwei was already in great pain, but she definitely didn't want Lian Jin to touch her. She looked at Hu Jinyao and begged, Jinyao, I beg you, don't give me to him. She and Lian Jin were now at odds with each other. She really couldn't trust him. Instead, she thought that Lian Jin would most likely kill her silently. You still say that you don't have an affair with him? Lian Jin's face was full of anger. He took a step forward and was about to attack Qi Shiwei. Hu Jinyao took a big step back. Seeing that Qi Shiwei's breathing had become rapid, he gritted his teeth and turned around to put her on the sofa. Shiwei, wait a moment. He turned to look at Lian Jin. He had wanted him to give up on his own. but now he could only make a move. On the other side, Qi Shiwei's situation was getting more and more urgent. Hua Jinyao didn't intend to stall for time. What? You want to make a move on me? Hua Jinyao didn't waste time talking to him. He directly punched Lian Jin in the face. Lian Jin moved quickly, but he didn't know that this was Hua Jinyao's feint. He threw a punch at Lian Jin's abdomen, and Lian Jin was forced to take a few steps back. Bastard. He was angry and rushed towards Hua Jinyao to attack. But how could he be Hua Jinyao's match? Hua Jinyao had trained in the army. Other than people like Zhang Yichen who had received special training and couldn't do anything about it, it wouldn't be a problem for him to deal with a few more people like Lian Jin. In less than 5 minutes, Hua Jinyao had already beaten Lian Jin to the ground. After dealing with him, he quickly ran outside with Qi Shiwei in his arms and got into his own car. By the time Lian Jin recovered from the pain and chased after him, Hua Jinyao had already left with Qi Shiwei. Qi Shiwei was in the back seat of the car, her entire body completely curled up. She looked like she was in great pain. Her entire body was starting to sweat and her face was pale. Hua Jinyao saw her situation from the rearview mirror and stepped on the accelerator. He could only be glad that this place wasn't too far from the city. He sped all the way and brought Qi Shiwei to the first hospital where Su Qingsang was in the shortest time possible. Su Qingsang happened to have an outpatient clinic today. A woman came because she hadn't gotten pregnant in 5 years of marriage, so she thought that there was something wrong with her. After Su Qingsang finished a full set of examinations for her, she told her that her health was very good and there was nothing wrong with her. You haven't been pregnant. It might be because of you or it might be because of your husband. If you want to know why you haven't had a child, you still have to ask your husband to come for a checkup. The woman's expression was a little conflicted. She told Su Qingsang hesitantly that her husband had a serious case of male chauvinism. She was afraid that he wouldn't be willing to come for a checkup. Su Qingsang had been in the hospital for a long time and had come into contact with all kinds of patients. She could only tell the other party her opinion. As for what the other party wanted to do, that was up to the other party. It wasn't easy for her to deal with it. Just as she was about to take a break, the office door was pushed open with a bang. Su Qingsang was shocked. She looked up and saw Hua Jinyao standing at the door with a woman in his arms. The woman was pregnant and there was still blood under her body. Hua Jinyao's body was also stained with the other party's blood. Qingsang, save her. Quick. Su Qingsang looked at the woman in his arms. The other party had already lost consciousness. The current situation didn't give her time to think about the relationship between this woman and Hua Jinyao. Put her down. Su Qingsang performed a preliminary examination on her. Her expression was a little serious. The pregnant woman's condition isn't very good. Her water has broken, but the uterus hasn't opened yet. She's already unconscious. I'm afraid we'll have to perform a cesarean section on her. I believe you. No matter what, you must ensure her safety. Su Qingsang glanced at Hua Jinyao. She didn't expect that one day Hua Jinyao would make the same mistake as those ordinary family members. He actually made her promise? Su Qingsang called someone over and had someone push Qi Shiwei into the operating theater. She called the operating theater and asked them to quickly make arrangements. She had to prepare for the surgery. After hanging up the phone, she turned to face Hua Jinyao. I'm sorry. I can't guarantee anything. I can only say that I'll try my best. Doctors weren't gods. Qi Shiwei's condition wasn't very good to begin with. She could only do her best and leave it to fate. Hua Jinyao nodded. I believe you. If possible, let her family come over. Hua Jinyao frowned. Her family isn't here. After Qi Shiwei's stepmother was sent to prison by her, Qi Shiwei's father was also removed from his original position as the president. That Lian Jin was obviously a bastard. Hua Jinyao wouldn't call him over. If you need any help, I'll go. Su Qingsang blinked and gestured for Hua Jinyao to pay the fee, sign it and prepare for the surgery. Okay, I'll go now. After saying that, Hua Jinyao hurriedly went to the payment counter. Su Qingsang glanced at his back and went to prepare for the surgery without saying a word. Qi Shiwei's condition was actually very bad, but she couldn't tell Hua Jinyao that. These issues were supposed to be discussed with her immediate family, but Qi Shiwei didn't have any immediate family now. Sun Huiya didn't have any surgery or debate today, so Su Qingsang called her over. This situation isn't very good. Sun Huiya said bluntly, the cervix hasn't opened, and the amniotic fluid has broken for so long. Let's perform the surgery immediately. I hope the child is fine. Su Qingsang wanted to say the same thing just now. After she and Sun Huya changed into surgical gowns, they entered the operating theater together. Although such a surgery was difficult, Sun Huya had always advocated giving young people more opportunities to train, so the chief surgeon was still Su Qingsang. Qi Shiwei, who was on the operating table, was already unconscious. Su Qingsang was afraid that she would wake up from the pain later, but she still asked the anesthesiologist to anesthetize her. She picked up the scalpel and gently cut open the first layer of Qi Shiwei's skin. Everything went smoothly and normally. However, when the child was carried out, everyone's hearts skipped a beat. The child was very small, and his body was already turning green. His small face turned purplish red. The midwife examined the baby and shook her head at Su Qingsang and Sun Huya. There are no vital signs anymore. Everyone's hearts were heavy. As an obstetrician and gynecologist, they were used to seeing life and death. However, the situation in front of them was still something they didn't want to face, but they had no choice. Give it a try and see if you can save her. Su Qingsang glanced at the midwife and gestured for her to try harder. She continued to move her hands. The midwife tried her best, but soon she shook her head at everyone. Sun Huya looked at the child and then at Su Qingsang. Her expression was calm. She had already guessed this outcome. When she was examining Qi Shiwei just now, she didn't hear the baby move. Now it was only to confirm her guess. Qi Shiwei's health was too poor. It was much more difficult for her to conceive this child than for ordinary pregnant women. The amniotic fluid broke too early, and the uterus didn't open for a long time. The child had been trapped inside for so long, and the chances of survival weren't high. Thinking of what Hu Jingyao had just said, Su Qingsang came back to her senses and looked at Qi Shiwei, who was still unconscious. Continue the surgery. At least we have to save the mother's life. Actually, Qi Shiwei's condition wasn't very good either. However, Su Qingsang and Sun Huya were willing to do their best to save her. In the following period of time, Su Qingsang and Sun Huya worked together to save Qi Shiwei, whose life was hanging by a thread. Qi Shiwei's health was very poor, especially her uterus. Her physique wasn't suitable for pregnancy at all. That child was born with a congenital deficiency, and her amniotic fluid broke first today. As a result, it would indeed be very difficult to save the child. Although her life had been saved, it would probably be very difficult for her to have her own child in the future. Su Qingsang and Sun Huya were both extremely experienced doctors, especially Sun Huya. When she saw the situation in Qi Shiwei's uterus, she knew that the chances of her getting pregnant again in the future were almost zero. This child is her first, right? It should be. Su Qingsang nodded. Looking at Qi Shiwei's pale face, her brows furrowed. This was her first pregnancy, but now it was like this. It would probably be difficult for her to accept this fact when she woke up, right? Su Qingsang stitched up Qi Shiwei's wound, and someone else took over the rest. She glanced at Qi Shiwei and left the operating theater. Wu Jingyao was still waiting outside. It had been nearly 3 hours since he entered the operating theater. When he saw Su Qingsang come out, he quickly stood up. How is it? How is she? She's fine. Wu Jingyao obviously heaved a sigh of relief. It's good that she's fine. Su Qingsang looked at him and wanted to say something, but she hesitated. Wu Jingyao sensitively noticed that something was wrong. She's fine. What about the child? Su Qingsang didn't say anything. Her expression spoke for itself. Wu Jingyao had a bad feeling. Is her child okay? It should be fine, right? Su Qingsang shook her head gently. I'm sorry the child wasn't saved. Wu Jingyao suddenly froze there. He thought of how Qi Shiwei cared about this child very much. He also thought of how Qi Shiwei wanted to give birth to this child and start a new life. After she came back, she was clearly very weak, but she risked her weak body to help him again and again. Not to mention the fact that she had saved his life before. He selfishly hoped that Qi Shiwei would be able to give birth to this child safely and smoothly. Seeing that Hu Jingyao had fallen into silence, Su Qingsang took off her mask and said in a low voice. In fact, when you sent it here, it took too long. In addition, it was due to her own physique. In fact, this child wasn't easy to keep. Su Qingsang had already examined the child just now. It wasn't that she had jinxed it. That child was much smaller than a normal child. It was congenitally deficient, and it didn't receive good care and nutrition from its mother. Even if it was born, it would probably be very difficult for it to grow up smoothly. When that time came, it would either be an illness or a disaster. It would be equally uncomfortable for the parents. Wu Jingyao knew that what she said was true. After all, when Qi Shiwei was pregnant, her situation looked different from that of ordinary pregnant women. What about her? How is she? Her life is saved. Su Qingsang wouldn't hide anything in front of him. However, she probably won't have her own child in the future. What did you say? Hua Jinyao finally had a different reaction. He widened his eyes and looked at Su Qingsang. For a moment he thought he had heard wrong. How could this be? Her health is very poor. It's not just a normal kind of poor. Her womb had once been severely injured, although it had already recovered. Although it has recovered, the injury is still there. She forced herself to get pregnant, which is already increasing the burden on her body. In addition, her uterus wasn't healthy enough for her to safely give birth to this child, and then there was this incident. Based on her situation, the chances of her having another child in the future are almost zero. Hua Jinyao stood there, thinking about Qi Shiwei's reaction when she woke up and found out about the news. He didn't know how to tell her. If you feel that it's difficult, let me tell her. Su Qingsang's words made Hua Jinyao look up at her. He shook his head. Let me tell her. He had already made up his mind, so Su Qingsang didn't intend to ask any more. However, she asked, is she the female classmate you mentioned last time? Yes. Hua Jinyao was afraid that Su Qingsang would misunderstand, so he explained a little. I met her in the United States. Although we were classmates, we weren't actually in the same class. However, because we were both from Rong City, we were closer. Why do I care so much about her? On one hand, it's because she has no other relatives in Rong City to take care of her. On the other hand, she once saved my life. After briefly explaining what happened that year, Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang very seriously. Qi Shiwei and I are purely friends and classmates. There's no other relationship. Don't think too much about it. Su Qingsang turned her face to look at Hua Jinyao because of his words. His expression was extremely serious, as if he was afraid that she would misunderstand. How do you know what I'm thinking? Don't worry, I'm not that jealous. As long as she didn't misunderstand. Hua Jinyao reached out to hold her hand. I know you won't be so petty, but I still feel that I need to explain it to you. I believe you, okay? Su Qingsang looked at the time. She had an outpatient clinic later. I still have an outpatient clinic. Your classmate will be sent to the ward later. As for her child and her physical condition in the future, you can decide for yourself what to say. If you feel that it's not appropriate to say it, I can explain it to her. Okay. Hua Jinyao looked at her focused and serious face and leaned over to kiss her forehead. Thank you, wife. You've worked hard. He was glib. Su Qingsang glanced at him. Okay. There's no need to say nice words. Hurry up and go see her. She'll probably wake up from the anesthesia in a while. I have an outpatient clinic. I'll come back later. Okay. Su Qingsang was about to leave, but she suddenly stopped again. By the way, you should hire a female nurse to take care of her. You're a man. It's not that convenient. Meeting Hua Jinyao's teasing gaze, Su Qingsang turned her face away in a very casual manner. To say the least, you're a man with a wife. You still have to pay attention to your image. Hua Jinyao suddenly curled the corners of his lips and moved his face closer to Su Qingsang. Jealous? He wasn't jealous just now. Now he even said to pay attention to his image. What's so funny about me being jealous? If I'm not jealous one day you'll cry. Her playful voice made Hua Jinyao's gloomy mood much better. Wife, have I ever told you that you look so cute when you're jealous? Su Qingsang rolled her eyes at him and turned to leave without saying anything else. After she left, Hua Jinyao's expression immediately became very serious. 10 minutes later he appeared in Qi Shiwei's ward. Her face was much uglier than when she had been sent to the hospital. After a cesarean section, a pregnant woman's stomach would not immediately disappear. At that moment, Qi Shiwei gave off the feeling that she was still pregnant. She just lay there. If it weren't for the fact that she was still breathing, Hua Jinyao would have suspected that she had passed away just like that. Qi Shiwei's body was very weak. She slept until night before she woke up. She had just woken up and her spirit was very poor. Her entire body gave off a weak feeling. Hua Jinyao had already asked Yang Wenchang to send some important business matters over to deal with. Seeing that Qi Shiwei had woken up, he immediately went forward and sat by her bed. Shiwei, how are you? Do you feel okay? Are you hungry? Do you want to eat? Qi Shiwei blinked her eyes and took a long time to recover. After she recovered, she suddenly looked at Hua Jinyao. Where's my child? Where's my child? How is it? Is it a boy or a girl? After the surgery, her voice was even hoarser than before. Even she herself felt uncomfortable and dry. But now she couldn't care less about that. She just wanted to know how her child was doing. When she was in the United States, she couldn't tell if it was a boy or a girl because the month was too young. After returning to China, the doctor wouldn't tell her the gender of the child. She had always wanted to have a daughter. This would make her feel that the child was no longer in her stomach, so it must have been born. Where's the child? The anticipation in her eyes was too obvious. Hu Jinyao didn't know what to say for a moment. It's a boy. Su Qingsang had come once just now. Hu Jinyao finally had the time to ask if Qi Shiwei's child was a boy or a girl. Thinking of that child, he still felt a lingering fear. That child was so young, but unfortunately he was no longer around. A boy. Qi Shiwei was a little disappointed, but only for a moment. A boy is good. Where's the child now? Can I see him? Hug him? Shiwei. Your due date isn't today. You should know that, right? Chapter 6:12. Qi Shiwei wanted to see the child. Shiwei, your body is very weak now. Why don't you go after you recover a little? I know my body is very weak. I just want to take a look. Can I take a look? When Qi Shiwei finished speaking in a hoarse voice, she was about to sit up when Hu Jinyao held her down in time. Shiwei. Wait a moment. Seeing her like this, Hu Jinyao almost didn't know what to say next. What? Hu Jinyao closed his eyes. He felt a little helpless, but he had to say it. Your child was not saved. Qi Shiwei was stunned. She blinked her eyes and didn't know what expression to put on her weak face. She just stared at Hu Jinyao. After saying that, Hu Jinyao couldn't say anything else. He could only look at her. After a few minutes, Qi Shiwei finally found her voice. Jinyao, are you joking? Hu Jinyao's expression was evasive. Not everyone could remain indifferent to the loss of a life. Jinyao, this joke is not funny. With a slight smile on her face, she looked reluctant. Obviously, she did not want to believe Hu Jinyao's words. Hu Jinyao knew that she wouldn't accept it so easily, but he still had to say something. Shiwei, your health isn't very good. This child stopped breathing the moment he was born. My condolences. He wasn't very good at comforting people. His feeble consolation sounded more or less powerless. Don't talk nonsense. Qi Shiwei didn't accept this result. Impossible. This was impossible. I clearly felt him moving in my stomach yesterday. He's fine, he's clearly fine. She became excited. Hu Jinyao's face was full of helplessness. Shiwei. Calm down. I don't believe it. My child. I want my child. I don't believe he's dead. You lied to me, you must have lied to me. Qi Shiwei sat up and reached out to pull out the needle in her hand. Hu Jinyao quickly stopped her. He held her hand down to keep her from moving. Shiwei, calm down. Your child is gone. Gone. Calm down, don't let him feel uneasy. Nonsense, you're lying to me. I don't believe it. I don't believe a word of it. Go away. Qi Shiwei struggled and insisted on pulling out the needle. She was determined to see her child. She had just given birth, so she shouldn't be very strong. However, now that she was stubborn, and Hu Jinyao was afraid of accidentally hurting her, he couldn't hold her down for a moment. Shiwei, calm down. Get out of my way, get out of my way. I'm going to see my baby. I'm going to see her. Qi Shiwei didn't want to listen to Hu Jinyao at all. She insisted on pulling out her needle. When Su Qingsang opened the door, she saw the scene in front of her. Qi Shiwei seemed to be about to get up, but Hu Jinyao pressed her down. From her point of view, the two of them seemed to be hugging each other. Shiwei, calm down. Go away, I hate you, you lied to me. My baby's fine. Where did he die? You lied to me. Go away. Su Qingsang listened to the conversation between the two of them. What else did she not understand? She frowned slightly and was about to go forward. Qi Shiwei's body was already weak, and her emotions were fluctuating so much. Before Su Qingsang could go forward to help Hu Jinyao calm her down, she had already fainted. Shiwei? Shiwei? Excuse me, let me take a look at her. Seeing Su Qingsang enter the door, Hu Jinyao moved his body to the side. Qingsang, you're here? Quick, look at her. She fainted. I know. Su Qingsang went forward to examine Qi Shiwei. A few minutes later, she looked at Hu Jinyao with a solemn expression. Her health wasn't good to begin with, and her previous pregnancy consumed too much of her vitality. Although the wound hasn't split open, her qi and blood are insufficient, and her health is very poor. If possible, try not to let her be stimulated again. Hu Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang. At this moment she was completely a professional doctor. He knew that what she said made sense, but the problem was that some things were out of his control. She became like this when she heard that the child was gone. Hua Jinyao's voice was very low. Whether it was because of their friendship as classmates or because she had saved his life before, he didn't want Qi Shiwei to become like this. Su Qingsang looked at Qi Shiwei on the hospital bed and said softly, "Give her some time. I believe she'll slowly accept it." Su Qingsang had been in the hospital for a long time, and she had seen many such situations. Hua Jinyao was silent. He was only worried that Qi Shiwei wouldn't be able to accept it in the end. After all, he could feel how much she cared about this child. "Have you eaten?" Su Qingsang looked at Hua Jinyao's solemn expression and looked at the time. It was already past 8 in the evening. "I ate a little." When he was dealing with work just now, Yang Wenchang had brought him dinner, but he didn't have much appetite. "What about you? Have you eaten?" Hua Jinyao looked at the white coat on Su Qingsang. Was she going to be on duty today? Yes. Su Qingsang was on duty today, so she had just gone to the cafeteria to eat. "By the way, did you hire a nurse for her?" "Yes. The nurse will come over later." Su Qingsang turned her head to look at him. The meaning in her eyes was unclear. "Don't tell me you want to stay here with her today? She has no other relatives now. I can't leave her alone." Su Qingsang took 2 steps forward and stood in front of Hua Jinyao. "Should I praise you for being a good person, or should I say that you don't know your limits and don't know how to keep your distance from other women?" Hua Jinyao looked at the expressionless Su Qingsang. "Are you angry? Can't I be angry?" Su Qingsang spread her hands. "My husband plans to stay here with another woman for the night. Do you think I can't be angry? She's in a special situation now. So, she needs you to accompany her? Can't she hire a nurse?" Qingsang? She wasn't usually such a petty person. Hua Jinyao was a little anxious and wanted to explain. "Qingsang, she just lost her child, so her mood isn't very stable. She doesn't have any relatives in Rong City. I'm teasing you." Su Qingsang glanced at him and smiled. "It's okay. You stay here. I'll go on the night shift. I'll come over to accompany you later when I'm free." "Qingsang." Hua Jinyao looked at her and was surprised. "You're really not angry?" "I'm really not." Su Qingsang looked at the time. She still had to go check the room. "All right, you stay here with her. I'm not such a petty person." Hua Jinyao was relieved. He reached out and rubbed Su Qingsang's hair. "All right. I'm leaving." Su Qingsang was about to leave, but Hua Jinyao reached out and hugged her. Qi Shiwei had done him a favor, and she had no other relatives in Rong City. No one else could help her except him. "What? Are you touched?" Su Qingsang turned her face to look at him with a faint smile in her eyes. "If you're touched, remember to treat me well. Otherwise I won't let you off. Don't worry, that day won't come." After Su Qingsang left, the nurse came. The nurse was a woman in her 30s with the surname Jiang. Because Qi Shiwei's condition was unstable today, Hua Jinyao asked her to go back first and come back tomorrow morning. He stayed in the ward to deal with his work. When it came to Qi Shiwei, she didn't wake up again. He had just finished dealing with all the work and saved the information on the computer. Just as he was about to get up and move his body, the door of the ward was pushed open. The person in front of him was Lian Jin. Seeing that it was him, Hua Jinyao's expression didn't look too good. "What are you doing here?" Lian Jin didn't even look at him. He walked past him and was about to walk inside. There were still injuries on his face from Hua Jinyao's beating. There were several bruises on his face. These made him look a little disheveled. Hua Jinyao stood in front of him and looked at the injuries on his face. "What? You still want to be beaten up by me again? Get lost." Lian Jin reached out to push Hua Jinyao. "I'm here to see my wife. What does it have to do with you?" "So what if Shiwei is your wife? I only know that she doesn't want to see you now and she won't see you." "Get out of the way. This has nothing to do with you." Lian Jin rushed forward to wake Qi Shiwei up, but Hua Jinyao blocked him with one hand. His narrowed eyes revealed a hint of sharpness. "If you don't want me to call someone to throw you out of the hospital, you can continue walking." Lian Jin had suffered a loss at Hua Jinyao's hands. Looking at him, he nodded hatefully. Okay. It's fine if I don't wake her up. Give me the child and I'll leave now." At the mention of the child, Hua Jinyao's expression changed. "There's no child." "What do you mean?" "The child wasn't saved." "The child wasn't saved?" Lian Jin was stunned for a moment before he quickly smiled. "Don't try to lie to me. It's impossible. How could it not be saved?" "The The child really wasn't saved. If you're here to have a child, you can go back now. Lian Jin sneered. He took a step forward and looked at Hu Jinyao in front of him. Where did you hide the child? I didn't hide it anywhere. I told you the child wasn't saved. Hu Jinyao looked regretful when he thought of the child. Hey, do you think I'll believe you when you say that? You don't have to believe me. You can ask the doctor. That child really wasn't saved. Lian Jin nodded. Ask the doctor? Your whole family has a big business. How do I know that you didn't collude with the doctor? If you want to think that way, I can't help it. Hu Jinyao frowned. He looked at Qi Shiwei, who was still frowning even though she was asleep on the bed. His voice was very soft. Lian Jin didn't believe Hu Jinyao's words at all. Don't think I don't know. You know all those doctors. It took him a lot of effort to find this side. Not only did he find it, but he also asked about it. The doctor who performed the surgery was called Su Qingsang. He also found out that Hu Jinyao and Su Qingsang were husband and wife. Husband and wife. Hu Jinyao frowned. The man in front of him didn't make sense at all. Lian Jin didn't want to talk to Hu Jinyao nicely either. Hand over the child and I'll leave. Otherwise I won't be polite. I told you the child wasn't saved. It's useless for you to look for me. You weren't saved? How can you be so calm if you weren't saved? Lian Jin didn't believe him at all. I don't care. Hand over the child for me. Hu Jinyao couldn't communicate with Lian Jin, and he didn't want Lian Jin to wake Qi Shiwei up. She was already very agitated. If she saw Lian Jin and became agitated again, something might happen. That wasn't what he wanted to see. He didn't respond, and Lian Jin pestered him even more. He insisted that Hu Jinyao was feeling guilty. Hu Jinyao was impatient to argue with him. He sent a message to Yang Wenchang and asked him to call a few people over. Lian Jin was still pestering him. Hu Jinyao lost his patience. Almost as soon as Yang Wenchang came up, he signaled that he could take Lian Jin away. How could Lian Jin leave just like that? He hadn't even seen his child yet. He started to make a fuss again, but it was useless this time. The people Yang Wenchang brought were quite powerful. In just a few days, Lian Jin was dragged away. Lian Jin was brought away by the people Yang Wenchang brought. His shoulder was pinched by the special forces and he couldn't move at all. He wasn't short of money, but when he left, he glared at Hu Jinyao with hatred. Hu Jinyao, I won't let this go. Let me tell you, if you don't give me the child, I won't let this go. You can think whatever you want. I'll say it again. The child wasn't saved. He's no longer here. He waved his hand and had Lian Jin dragged out. Lian Jin was taken away, and the ward returned to silence. In just a short while, Su Qingsang was shocked. She came over and asked Hu Jinyao with concern what was going on. It's fine. It's all settled. Hu Jinyao met the concern in Su Qingsang's eyes and smiled at her. Are you done with your night shift? Do you want to rest? No, I'm on the night shift today. I won't leave until tomorrow morning. Su Qingsang looked in Qi Shiwei's direction. Is she still not awake? No. She hadn't woken up even after the commotion just now. Hu Jinyao couldn't help but be a little worried. It's fine. She's just too weak. Just let her sleep for a while. Su Qingsang had examined Qi Shiwei in detail. There wasn't much wrong with her body, but she was still too weak. In the current situation, it was normal for her to be unconscious for a long time. It was just that Qi Shiwei was unconscious for a long time. She slept until the next morning. The nurse, Xiao Jiang, had already arrived. Hu Jinyao had slept in the ward for a while yesterday. Su Qingsang had come to see him a few times. Seeing that Qi Shiwei had woken up, he asked Xiao Jiang to heat up the soup that he had asked Yang Wenchang to deliver. He turned around and saw that Qi Shiwei's eyes were wide open as she stared straight at the ceiling. Shiwei, are you okay? How do you feel? Qi Shiwei didn't hear Hu Jinyao's words at all. She remained in that position, staring at the sky above her head. Qi Shiwei in this state was even more worrying than yesterday when she was hysterical. Shiwei, can you say something? Qi Shiwei didn't react. It was as if she didn't hear him. Shiwei, Qi Shiwei? Qi Shiwei blinked and turned to look at Hu Jinyao. Why are you still here? Shiwei, are you okay? You can go. Qi Shiwei looked at him, but her gaze didn't seem to be focused. I'm fine. I'm fine. Shiwei. She was in a good state? Hu Jinyao began to worry. You can go. I said I'm fine. Seeing that Hu Jinyao was standing there motionless, she added, You've been guarding me here all night, right? Aren't you afraid that your wife will misunderstand? Hurry up and leave. She won't misunderstand. I told her. No woman would be so generous. She doesn't mind. Qi Shiwei looked at him expressionlessly. You can go. I want to be alone for a while. After she said this, Hu Jinyao had no choice but to leave. Before he left, he looked at Qi Shiwei with a worried expression. Shiwei, if anything happens to you, call me. Tianyu Group was very close to the first hospital, and Su Qingsang was here. When the time came, he would tell her to let the other doctors keep an eye on her. Qi Shiwei saw that Hu Jinyao was still motionless. You can go. I told you I want to be alone. Hu Jinyao had no choice but to leave. He wanted Xiao Jiang to stay, but Xiao Jiang was also chased away by Qi Shiwei. Hu Jinyao walked to the door and looked at Qi Shiwei one last time. Shiwei, you have to calm down. I told you to calm down. Xiao Jiang is right outside. If there's anything, just call me. He thought of the 2 pregnant women who had an accident in Su Qingsang's hospital in Lin City. His back felt a chill. Shiwei, no matter what you're thinking now, you have to remember that the most important thing is to be alive. Nothing is more important than life. Qi Shiwei heard this. She turned her face and looked at Hu Jinyao blankly. What? Do you think I'll commit suicide? Don't worry. I won't do such a cowardly thing. After saying this, she closed her eyes and refused to look at Hu Jinyao again. Hu Jinyao had no choice but to leave. Before he left, he instructed Xiao Jiang to guard the door and pay attention to the movements inside. After leaving the ward, he went straight to Su Qingsang's office. She had been on the night shift for the whole night and was already very tired. At this moment, she was sleeping on the small bed in the duty room. When she saw Hu Jinyao come, she yawned and sat up. Why are you here? Have you had breakfast? Yes. Hu Jinyao nodded. Looking at the fatigue on her face, he felt a little heartache. Aren't you off work? Why aren't you home yet? I'll go back later. There's a meeting in the courtyard later. I'll go home after the meeting. Don't be too tired. If you don't have the energy for that meeting, let Director Sun apply for leave for you. Stop fooling around. It's just a meeting. How tired can I be? Don't always think about giving me special treatment. Su Qingsang stretched and felt much more awake. Her gaze fell on Hu Jinyao. He seemed to be in good spirits. How is she? Is she awake? Is she okay? She's awake. She's fine for the time being. Hu Jinyao thought of Qi Shiwei's performance just now. She was so calm that she didn't look like someone who had just lost a child. He told Su Qingsang about her condition. There was indeed a hint of worry in his words. Do you think she'll take things too hard? In fact, the Qi Shiwei he knew was a very strong-willed and strong-willed person. However, he could tell that Qi Shiwei's recent condition was obviously not good. He was very afraid that she would be impulsive or take things too hard. I don't know. Su Qingsang shook her head. Some women could slowly recover after losing their children, but some people had to spend a long time to get over that kind of pain. I'll see her later. I think my identity as a doctor will always make her feel better. Okay. Thank you for your hard work. Your friend is also my friend. Besides, she's my patient. Don't worry. I'll definitely let the other colleagues keep an eye on her. Okay. Hu Jinyao was naturally willing to believe that Qi Shiwei wasn't such a fragile person. He still had something to do at the company. After asking Su Qingsang to take care of her, he left. Su Qingsang looked at the time. There was still nearly an hour before the meeting. She went back to sleep for a while. When she woke up, she washed her face in the bathroom of the duty room. She woke up and tidied herself up before heading to the meeting room. In the obstetrics and gynecology department, apart from the doctors in the outpatient department, Chief Sun, Deputy Chief Shin, Yang Lu, Zheng Qinyu, and Ling Fei were all there. There were also some people from other departments. Su Qingsang knew some of them, but she didn't know some of them. The meeting soon began. Su Qingsang listened for a while before the door of the meeting room was pushed open. The head nurse, Li Meilin, stood at the door. Behind her were 2 uniformed police officers. Everyone looked at the door, and Su Qingsang also looked at Li Meilin. What was going on in front of her? Police officers? Deputy Director Zhou Xiaonan, who was in charge of the meeting, stood up. Before he could say anything, the 2 police officers had already walked to Su Qingsang and stood in front of her. You're Su Qingsang? The 2 police officers looked at Su Qingsang from head to toe, as if they were confirming it. One of the older policewomen was the first to ask. Yes, I'm Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang was sitting near the bottom of the meeting room. When she was suddenly called up by the police for questioning, she stood up as well. Are you a doctor in the obstetrics and gynecology department? Yes. Su Qingsang blinked her eyes and subconsciously looked at Sun Huiya. Sun Huiya was also a little confused. Her eyes were filled with worry. She didn't understand why the police were asking these questions. Yesterday you delivered a child to a pregnant woman? Yes. The policewoman's voice was a little cold. Su Qingsang nodded. She had only performed one delivery surgery yesterday, and it was Qi Shiwei's. Is that child dead? Yes. Su Qingsang nodded. She didn't understand what the other party wanted to ask. The policewoman showed her ID to Su Qingsang, then looked at her with a serious face. Miss Su Qingsang, we suspect that you are related to a murder case. Please come with us to assist in the investigation. What? Su Qingsang thought that she had heard wrongly. What case did you say? A murder case. The policewoman's attitude was not bad. She repeated, you are suspected of murdering Miss Qi Shiwei's newborn baby. Now please come with us. Su Qingsang's lips moved. This time she glanced at Sun Huiya again. Sun Huiya was already anxious when she heard this. She stood up and walked to Su Qingsang's side. Police comrade, are you mistaken? Qingsang is just a doctor. The child's death has nothing to do with her. Here's the thing. I'm sorry, regardless of whether she did it or not, we need her to go with us to assist in the investigation. But there's no such thing. If there's no such thing, we will naturally clear her name. Now come with us. Chapter 613. It was Su Qingsang's first time coming to a place like the police station. She was taken to a small dark room. She had watched TV before. When her eyes met the glass, she knew that someone was staring at them. Su Qingsang wasn't afraid. Instead, she felt that it was a little novel. A normal person would never come to a place like this in their lifetime. It was a rare experience. The two policemen who brought her here happened to be a man and a woman. The policewoman saw her coming. Not only did she not panic, but she also looked so calm. This person was either too magnanimous or too good at acting. Sit down, the policewoman said. Su Qingsang looked at the table. There were two chairs on one side and one on the other. The armrest of the chair looked like the kind that could be used to handcuff a prisoner in movies and TV shows. Su Qingsang frowned. She was only here to assist in the investigation today. Why were these people treating her like a prisoner now? Su Qingsang, sit down. The policewoman called again, her voice obviously reprimanding. Su Qingsang glanced at her indifferently and stepped forward to sit down on the chair. Fortunately, the person didn't handcuff her. Otherwise, she couldn't guarantee that she would still be able to cooperate. The two policemen sat down opposite her. As soon as the light was turned on, Su Qingsang instinctively closed her eyes. Su Qingsang? The policewoman took out a notebook, opened it, and began to record Su Qingsang's statement. Name? Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang felt that it was a little funny. The other party had just called her name, but now they were asking her what her name was? Gender? Female. Profession? Doctor. Obstetrician and gynecologist at the first hospital? Yes. You did an operation yesterday? Yes. What operation? A cesarean section. The other party already knew but still came to ask. Su Qingsang was quite helpless. The questions that the other party wanted to ask were very simple, and she cooperated and answered them. The first few were all appetizers. Soon it was the main point. Someone is accusing you of murdering the newborn baby that you delivered yesterday. Su Qingsang froze for a moment. Even though she knew her crime, she still couldn't help but laugh when she heard it unexpectedly. Comrade, are you kidding? Be serious. Police comrade, I did perform a cesarean section yesterday. I was the chief surgeon. The baby wasn't breathing when it was born. How did it become me who murdered the child? The two policemen looked at each other, and the policewoman looked at Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang, the informant said that you could have killed the baby during the delivery. Officer, you might not understand, but I don't have the final say in the operating theater. It was impossible for a surgery to be completed by only one person. For a cesarean section, other than the chief surgeon, which is me, there are also assistant doctors, midwives, nurses, and anesthetists in the operating theater. I would like to ask, how can we kill that newborn baby in front of so many people? You mean you have nothing to do with the baby's death? Of course. Su Qingsang's voice was very soft. If you don't believe me, you can ask the other doctors, nurses, and my other colleagues in the operating room yesterday. They can prove that I'm not lying. Then do you admit that it might be because of your improper operation during the operation, because of your delay, that the baby died? In other words, even if you didn't do it on purpose, there was still a medical problem? Su Qingsang felt like laughing at that moment. Judging from the other party's attitude, It seemed like she had to put some kind of crime on her head? As I said just now, the operating theater isn't mine alone. All our operations are strictly according to the doctor's ethics. So I don't think there's a medical problem with me. So you insist that the baby's death has nothing to do with you? Yes. I'm also very sorry that I didn't succeed in saving the baby's life. Not to mention the fact that Qi Shiwei had saved Hu Jinyao's life. Even if she was just an ordinary doctor, she wouldn't leave him in the lurch. Don't you have any responsibility for this medical accident? The policewoman's words were very rude, and Su Qingsang frowned. Officer, first of all, this isn't a medical accident. This is just an accident that we don't want to happen, but it happened. Second, doctors are just doctors, ordinary people. If we can cure all diseases, if we can save all lives, then we're no longer humans, we're gods. We're not gods. We can't save all lives. Although we hope so, we can't do it. Su Qingsang's voice was very soft. As a doctor, she had sworn an oath on the day she graduated from medical school. But sometimes, even if they tried their best, it was impossible for the results to be perfect. The two policemen looked at each other, and finally one of the doctors looked at Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang, you don't need to brag here, and you don't need to defend yourself here. Since we've called you here for questioning, it's because you have the motive to hurt that baby. I have a motive? What motive did she have? That's right. The policewoman nodded. At this point, do you still not want to confess? Sorry, I don't quite understand what you mean. What do I have to confess? You have a grudge against that woman. Su Qingsang almost choked on her own saliva. I have a grudge against that woman? When she said me, she specially pointed at herself, her face full of disbelief. When did she have a grudge against Qi Shiwei? That's right. The male policeman nodded, and his voice was very calm. We already have all the evidence in the situation, so it's better for you to be honest. Evidence? What evidence? What does the woman who lost her child have to do with you? Do you really not want to confess? I'm sorry, Comrade Police. I really don't know what my relationship with her is. Why don't you tell me? The policewoman nodded. It seems that you won't give up until you reach the Yellow River. As she spoke, she took out a document from the side and spread it in front of Su Qingsang. Qi Shiwei, female, 30 years old this year. From Rong City. She used to be a couple with your husband, Hu Jinyao, at Yale University. Ever since Qi Shiwei returned to the country, she has been in contact with Hu Jinyao. We have evidence that Hu Jinyao has been in and out of the villa where Qi Shiwei lives many times. Su Qingsang blinked and looked at the few photos on the document. One of them was Hu Jinyao entering a villa, and the other was Hu Jinyao sitting in the garden with Qi Shiwei. Hu Jinyao seemed to be hugging Qi Shiwei. His hand was on Qi Shiwei's waist, and the two of them looked extremely intimate. Su Qingsang furrowed her brows slightly when she saw the photo. Her expression seemed to confirm the police's guess. The policewoman took the document back. The expression on her face was colder than before. Now, can you confess? What do you want me to confess to? Su Qingsang, you have to know that it's not good for you to be like this now. The policewoman knocked on the table with a threatening look on her face. Leniency for confessing, severity for resistance. You should have heard of this before, right? I've heard of it, but I don't quite understand. What do I have to confess to? Are you still playing dumb? The male policeman slammed the table hard. You clearly knew that Hu Jinyao was in a relationship with Qi Shiwei. You were indignant. That's why you thought of a way to secretly kill him. But you knew that you couldn't kill Qi Shiwei, so you attacked that child, right? Su Qingsang couldn't even laugh now. She looked at the male policeman with a hint of mockery on her face. Do you police officers now not care about evidence but rely on guesses to solve cases? Su Qingsang, be honest. Su Qingsang smiled and looked at the two policemen in front of her. I just want to ask, do you have any evidence? Su Qingsang, it's useless to argue. Please answer our questions honestly. You killed Qi Shiwei's child because you were unhappy with your husband's relationship with Qi Shiwei, didn't you? Comrade policeman, from now on, I refuse to answer any of your questions. Su Qingsang's temper flared up. She placed her hands on the table and looked at the two policemen in front of her with an extremely serious expression. Either you show me the evidence and send me to prison in an open and above-board manner. Or please let me go. You have no reason, and you can't pin such a serious crime on me just because of a groundless guess. Su Qingsang, do you really think we can't do anything to you? The policewoman glared at Su Qingsang with obvious dissatisfaction in her eyes. I'll say it again. Please be honest. I refuse. Su Qingsang threw out these 3 words and didn't answer any of the other party's questions. Now she was only waiting for Hu Jinyao to find a lawyer to get her out of here. She believed that Hu Jinyao wouldn't let her down. When Hu Jinyao went to the hospital, he didn't know that Su Qingsang had been taken away. After all, no one told him. He first went to Qi Shiwei's ward. After Xiao Jiang called him and said that a man had come to the ward, Qi Shiwei was very agitated and was in a pinch. When he entered the ward, Qi Shiwei was sitting on the bed. She had just given birth and she was very weak. But even so, she still glared at the person in front of her with hatred. Lian Jin stood about a meter away from the bed. There was still Xiao Jiang between him and Qi Shiwei. Xiao Jiang stood in front of Lian Jin and looked at him with fear and worry in her eyes. Seeing that Hu Jinyao had arrived, Lian Jin sneered. What? Do you think you don't have to solve the problem between us just because you called your lover? Lian Jin. I have nothing to say to you. Get lost. Qi Shiwei was so angry that her chest rose and fell violently. She was like a piece of paper floating in the wind, feeling as if she could fall at any moment. Hu Jinyao took 2 steps forward and stood in front of Lian Jin in place of Xiao Jiang. It seems that I was too polite to you yesterday. Yang Wenchang had already called for people to guard outside. As long as he called for them, they could come in at any time and throw Lian Jin out of the hospital. Hu Jinyao, you still have time to care about me now? Lian Jin looked at Hu Jinyao and smiled meaningfully. Jieske, I really can tell that you still have such deep feelings for this woman. Lian Jin, keep your mouth clean. Hu Jinyao's eyes were sharp, and his expression was sinister. What? Are you angry from embarrassment? You don't even care about your wife for this woman. Did I say something wrong? What did he mean? Before Hu Jinyao could react, Lian Jin sneered and looked past Hu Jinyao at Qi Shiwei, who was lying on the hospital bed. Qi Shiwei, either hand over the child to me. Or, I can only think of another way to get you to hand over the child. Get lost. Qi Shiwei had already lost that child and she was already sad enough. But Lian Jin was adding insult to injury. She couldn't help but feel angry. Lian Jin, if you don't leave now, do you believe that I'll die with you? Lian Jin sneered and looked at Hu Jinyao. Just as he was about to say something, he turned to look at her because of Qi Shiwei's words. Shiwei, don't be impulsive. There's no need to lower yourself to the same level as such a person. As he spoke, he called Yang Wenchang over and asked him to bring his men to throw Lian Jin out. This time, Lian Jin had a smile on his face. That smile had a deeper meaning. Hu Jinyao, if you have the ability, guard her for the rest of your life. I'd like to see if you'll regret it in the end. Hu Jinyao was impatient to listen to his nonsense. He waved his hand and asked Yang Wenchang to take him away. After Lian Jin left, Qi Shiwei almost lost all her strength. Her body went limp and she fell back. Xiao Jiang took a pillow and placed it behind her, then helped her steady herself. She sat there leaning against the headboard, her face devoid of any color. Hu Jinyao asked Xiao Jiang to go out and instructed Yang Wenchang to get someone to guard the door of the ward. Only then did he return to the bed and look at Qi Shiwei with a worried expression. Shiwei, do you need me to help you find a new place? Qi Shiwei sat there woodenly. When she heard Hu Jinyao's words, she looked up at him. Why look for a new place? I'm so weak now. If he comes looking for me again, it'll be useless no matter where I go. Hu Jinyao's brows were tightly knitted together. He had never asked Qi Shiwei about her and Lian Jin, but now that Lian Jin had come looking for her again and again, he really couldn't guard her for the rest of his life. Aren't you divorced with him? Do you need to call the police? Let the police handle it. Qi Shiwei looked at him and suddenly laughed. Divorce? How could that pervert let me off so easily? Shiwei. Hu Jinyao was even more confused by her expression. What exactly happened between you and him? Qi Shiwei glanced at Hu Jinyao, lowered her head and placed her hand on her abdomen. There used to be a child there, but that child was no longer there. She had always been running away and hiding. She thought that she could hide. But it seemed that at this moment she realized that she couldn't hide at all. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.